Chapter 1177 Substitute on the desolate moors filled with deep ravines, Ammon stood in different spots. They opened their mouths and chanted in Jotun, the blessed of the spirit world and Sapphira Castle, the mystery stemming from ancient times, the witness of an extended history, protector of Backlund magic and drama performers, the great Gehrman sparrow. These voices were layered as they bored into the void, as though they extended to an infinite distance. 10 seconds later, all of them adjusted their crystal monocles in different manners and chuckled softly. He changed it really quickly. If Gehrman Sparrow was still automatically responding to this honorific name, they could then use this opportunity to determine the other party's location and create an error, to appear directly beside their target. In the darkness that was illuminated by lightning from time to time, the hatted and coated Klein proceeded north at a moderate pace while holding a lantern. There's a prayer. Ammon is using Gehrman Sparrow's honorific name. This means that a number of Ammons aren't too far from me. But the City of Silver doesn't have his parasites. They're in the surrounding patrol teams, or in some unexpected creatures. As he walked, Klein suddenly turned his head and listened carefully for a few seconds. Regarding this matter, he was rather glad that he was cautious enough. He had changed the honorific name that allowed default acknowledgement while above the gray fog. It went from the protector of Backlund magic and drama performers to protector of all poor children in Backlund. This came from the lone charity bursary foundation he had set up. Yes, Ammon is a cryptologist. It's very likely that he can interpret this honorific name from all the information regarding Dwayne Dantes. No, I don't even need an automatic response. As Klein looked at the faint yellow light emitted by the lantern, he quickly made a decision. He made every worm of spirit only capable of listening to prayers, without having the ability to autonomously respond unless they had been given permission from the main body. This way, frequent prayers would severely affect his daily life, but it wasn't a big problem. This was because, other than Ammon's vile harassment, no one else would pray to Gehrman Sparrow since he hadn't spread the word about his honorific name. After settling this matter, Klein thought of all of Ammon's terrifying aspects. He suddenly had some doubts about what to do next. His original plan was to stay far away from the City of Silver and head to the Nois ruins in the north to investigate the situation there. He wanted to see if he could obtain the main ingredients needed for the Miracle Invoker potion. However, after connecting that ancient city ruins with Ammon, a problem was revealed. Klein could already confirm that the upper levels of neighboring pathways also followed the law of beyonder characteristic convergence. Since Ammon had been wandering around the forsaken land of the gods for more than 1,000 years, and had come near the City of Silver, how could he not be attracted to the Nois ruins in the north? For the chief of the City of Silver to not dare to enter, it means the power in Nois City has definitely reached the level of an angel. Ammon wouldn't ignore it. He probably doesn't dare to directly eat such a high-level beyonder characteristic of a neighboring pathway, but that doesn't prevent him from setting up a trap. Even if he hadn't done so in the past, he would definitely be rushing over there now. Of course, I can't exclude the possibility that Ammon has yet to discover it because, during the City of Silver Chief's first visit, the Nois ruins weren't as dangerous. Perhaps that power at the angel level came to the Nois ruins later. He has been constantly migrating his believers to avoid Ammon. Amidst his thoughts, Klein felt a little afraid about heading northwest for the ancient city. He decided to first see if there were any other ways to obtain the main ingredient of the Miracle Invoker potion before considering if he should head to the periphery of the Nois ruins to observe and gather some intel. With this in mind, he walked towards the wreckage of a tall tower in his black coat and half-top hat, guided by the occasional lightning. Along the way, in the dangerous darkness outside the dim yellow light, monsters lined up and silently followed him. They were already his marionettes. Compared to them, the saints of the seer pathway were even more bizarre and terrifying. As they walked, one of the monsters that looked like a fish with limbs suddenly chanted in Jotun, "The sun that is eternal. You are an inextinguishable light. You are the embodiment of order." The moment it finished reciting the three-lined honorific name, the monster collapsed to the ground and lost its life. The honorific name of deities often wasn't limited to 3 lines, but when chanting, one could choose any 3. For example, The eternal blazing sun's complete honorific name was Eternal Blazing Sun, Inextinguishable Light, Embodiment of Order, God of Contracts, Guardian of Businesses. And just now, Klein had used the first three. With this method, he prayed to the Lord of Storms, the God of Knowledge and Wisdom, and the Evernight Goddess, hoping to receive a certain response. However, there was no change in his surroundings 15 minutes later. It's useless to pray to a sequence zero true deity in the forsaken land of the gods, unless the target is the true creator, or is an existence that wields things like Sapphira Castle or the Chaos Sea. That's not right. In Afternoon Town, that clergyman had the goddess's true name concealed when saying it. When he mentioned the fourth king of angels, he suffered immolation due to the involvement of deities. Perhaps it's because there's still all kinds of divine power in the forsaken land of the gods, not only concealment and degeneration. And the true names of the different deities each have special meaning in mysticism, allowing it to stir the corresponding powers? This way, it would explain why the City of Silver has been teaching the two true names of Badheil and Haraburgen, but they didn't end up establishing any connection with the God of Combat or the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. The prayers in the forsaken land of the gods are not heard by the true deities, or even if they can hear them, they are unable to respond. This also means that there are no remnant powers of the God of Combat or the God of Knowledge. Otherwise, there would have been certain anomalies. Yes, it's also possible that it's not because there are no anomalies, but that the two Grade 0 sealed artifacts, God-level sealed artifacts, in the City of Silver have eliminated them. In that case, if I were to directly chant the true name of the goddess, would I cause the surrounding darkness and concealment to stir? If this kind of power can be controlled, I'll have an additional effective trump card when being tracked by a mon. The probability isn't very high. Directly chanting the true name of a deity is an act of blasphemy, and it will result in the corresponding backlash, just like Afternoon Town's clergyman. Based on his logic and the phenomenon he had seen, Klein came up with a theory on the present situation. He was eager to try reading out all the true names of the deities he knew, one by one, and checking their effects. Finally, he restrained himself and didn't blindly make the attempts. I'd better go above the gray fog, to do a divination first. Otherwise, who knows if there will be an unbearable accident. Divination involving deities might not give a clear revelation. After muttering inwardly for a while, Klein scoffed at his impulsiveness. My previous plan was akin to, I haven't been courting death for 2 days. I shall do it seriously today. At that moment, he had already arrived at a collapsed tower. He sat beside a wall that had only been cut down by half. He reached out to take out a paper crane from the historical void, and he ignited it. He wanted to see if he could contact the Snake of Fate Will Septon series if there was a medium. He wanted to know where he could obtain the main ingredients of the Miracle Invoker potion. Under the illumination of his third summoning of the lantern, Klein fell into a deep sleep, but he didn't dream of anything. Indeed, it doesn't work. After he woke up, Klein shook his head and let his body enter a historical void. Following that, he took 4 steps counterclockwise and arrived above the gray fog. Sitting at the seat belonging to the fool, he beckoned for a small paper box from the junk pile. Inside was a stack of paper cranes. These were personally folded by a certain baby. At the same time, the World Gehrman Sparrow was conjured. He prayed to Mr. Fool in a grayish-white region and requested him to forward his request to Miss Justice, saying that this act could allow her to make contributions to her exchange for the manipulator potion formula. Of course, Klein had already revealed that the potion needed to be consumed while amidst a huge emotional resonance. Backlund Empress Borough, inside the Hall family's luxurious mansion. Audrey returned to her bedroom once again, and set up a bestowment ritual to obtain the paper crane. She picked up a thin pencil and wrote on the paper crane's surface, Dwayne Dantes has requested you to meet with me. After finishing her preparations, Audrey followed Mr. World's instructions and placed the paper crane under her pillow before lying down to sleep. Soon she saw a pitch-black desolate plain. As a dreamwalker who had given herself hints in advance, she maintained her consciousness and walked towards the black steeple in the middle of the plains with strong curiosity. As soon as she arrived at her destination, Audrey's spiritual perception was triggered. She raised her head and looked at the top of the steeple. At some point in time, there was a giant silver snake coiled there. This gigantic snake didn't have any scales. Its body was covered with symbols and patterns that formed wheels that were connected to each other, with different labels. At that moment, the gigantic snake was staring at Audrey with its bright red and cold eyes. It said in a low voice, "What does Dwayne Dantes want?" "This is the angel of the fate pathway that gave Ma'am Hermit a drop of blood?" Audrey controlled her thoughts and calmly looked at the gigantic snake. She said in honesty, "He wanted me to ask you where he can obtain the main ingredient of the miracle invoker potion?" The gigantic silver snake suddenly fell silent for a few seconds before saying, "The number of sequence 2s in different pathways differ in numbers. Under the situation of the quota of attendant of mysteries being filled, there can only be a total of 6 miracle invokers. A miracle invoker is the name of a sequence 2 potion. Mr. World is going to become an angel? Or is he making preparations for his partner? No, if it's a companion, he can get them to ask him themselves." Audrey was first alarmed before she began to look forward to the mysterious serpent's answer. Chapter 1178, I have a blessed. The gigantic silver snake looked down at Audrey and opened its blood-red mouth. The sequence 1 potion that Zeratul, the leader of the secret order, consumed came from an attendant of mysteries. In other words, he possesses an extra miracle invoker characteristic. Similarly, it was the same for the ancestor of the Antigonus family back then. Of course, if they were interested in something, or if they had a candidate who had won the favor of the family to the point of them being willing to nurture them, then an angel with sufficiently high status can separate the extra miracle invoker beyonder characteristic to the other party. The third miracle invoker's beyonder characteristic had combined with a characteristic of mysterious origins. It has become sealed artifact 0-05, also known as the magic wishing lamp. A true deity once attempted to destroy this item, to separate the characteristics and allow them to converge automatically, but eventually failed. The fourth and fifth miracle invoker beyonder characteristics are in the form of a grade 0 sealed artifact that exists in the churches of the Eternal Blazing Sun and Lord of Storms. One of them is named 0-13. It comes from the third epic's creator, designated as the Last Banquet. The other is codenamed 0-32, a product of the War of the Four Emperors, designated as theater with curtains that never draw. The sixth miracle invoker beyonder characteristic might be in the forsaken land of the gods. During the third epoch, there was a remnant dark demonic wolf who occasionally appeared. After the cataclysm, he vanished without a trace. Audrey listened attentively and thought carefully for a moment before saying, "You're saying that, under the situation where the attendant of mysteries spots are filled, there are only 6 miracle invokers. And now, you only mention the secret order's leader, Zeratul, and the ancestor of the Antigonus family, but the spots don't seem to be filled. In such a situation, there might be an extra miracle invoker beyonder characteristic." This wasn't information that the World Gehrman Sparrow had informed her of in advance. Instead, it was a question that Audrey had come up with on her own accord from the details of the answer and her knowledge of mysticism. The eyes of the giant silver snake moved slightly. Indeed, there should be 3 attendants of mysteries. Visit website our list novel. But in the second epoch, in the era when the ancient god, Phlegria, still lived, the third set of the attendant of mysteries beyonder characteristic seemed to have disappeared without a trace. No one knows where it is. Likewise for the corresponding miracle invoker beyonder characteristic. Perhaps it has already combined together, and has found a sufficiently concealed method to hide itself. Audrey nodded gently and said, "I understand. I'll pass on the information to Mr. Dwayne Dantes." "Oh, he even asked me to ask you if there's anything you need his help with?" The giant silver snake slithered up and a third of its body stood up. "No, a small matter. Yes, I have a blessed who is an outstanding gourmet. He has a desire to taste ice cream from the various noble families, so as to determine the most delicious one. This request, Mr. Snake, maybe it's Ma'am Snake, is really nice to her blessed. His tone is as if he can't wait. This is too simple. I can agree to help on Mr. World's behalf and complete it on my own. I'll just treat it as accumulating the sufficient contributions needed to exchange the potion formula. Audrey said thoughtfully, no problem. But how do I send him the ice cream? The giant silver snake slowly coiled and said, sacrifice it to him. He's already a sequence 3 saint, and can accept sacrifices in the same city. His honorific name is the embodiment of luck, the clairvoyant monster, the calamity that spreads misfortune, the witnesses of all fates in Backland, the keeper of chaos and madness. There's a difference between this honorific name and a normal sequence 3's. There's no name at the end. Audrey's eyes darted around slightly, but she didn't say anything further and nodded in agreement. Keeper of chaos and madness. Will's last honorific name is quite interesting. This shouldn't be the honorific name of the Snake of Fate, but something that he used when he was at sequence 3. Some tweaks were made later on. The monster pathways watches over chaos and madness? Or could it be said that in this world, even for fate, those at the lower sequences are in chaos and madness? Monsters are working hard to resist all of this, making everything seem normal? After Klein heard Miss Justice's answer, he didn't find it odd for Will Accepton to request for ice cream. Instead, he found the honorific name of the Life School of Thought president rather interesting. Having a blessed. That's like saying I know someone. Did Will learn this from me? No, I have a real blessed, Danitz. Later on, I'll have this fellow sacrifice something for me to eat. I can't really eat those mutated monsters or summon projections from the historical void, right? Yes, if I have a chance, I'll invite little son to try them together. I can't let him be obsessed with Frank's mushrooms. The number of blessed serving will definitely won't be less than mine. There might even be more. He has the huge life school of thought. Klein conjured the world Gehrman Sparrow and made him reply to Miss Justice, indicating that the ice cream contributed plenty. After completing all of this, he wrapped the edge of the long modeled table and seriously considered the problem with the main ingredient of the miracle invoker. There's no need to think about the miracle invoker beyonder characteristic with Zeratul. It's impossible for him to separate it to give it to me. He only wants to turn me into his marionette. It's not like there's zero hope with Antigonus's 2 portions, but if that's the case, I'll have to request it from the goddess again. I can't offer something equivalent. I'm afraid. Besides, the goddess might not be able to provide it. The reason why she wants to seal the half-fool, who has lost control, is probably because she is unable to kill him. Once he is killed, he will be able to escape his current predicament and revive elsewhere, just like how I escaped from Ammon. Under such a situation, the goddess has no way of getting Antigonus to separate a miracle invoker beyond her characteristic. Even a true deity can't shatter 0-05, so there's no point targeting it. It's useless even if I have it. This sealed artifact's origins are truly mysterious. There's something very fishy about it. The Church of the Eternal Blazing Suns 0-13 is called the Last Banquet. It comes from the City of Silver's creator. Why does this person always like to use the names that have dangerous implications? The Church of the Lord of Storms 0-32 is theater with curtains that never draw. Just the sound of it allows me to imagine what it's like. The chances of obtaining these 2 grade 0 sealed artifacts are very low, but it's not impossible. It just depends on whether the Eternal Blazing Sun and Lord of Storms are willing to support my growth, so as to contain Ammon. Yes. Up to now, they have yet to show any kindness. I can't find a suitable way to interact with the right person. I can't possibly use divination to spy on the Eternal Blazing Sun again and communicate with him through space, right? If that happens, wouldn't it be better if he directly invades Sapphira Castle and takes control of this place? If I were to nurture Mr. Hangman and wait till he has the qualifications to come into contact with a grade 0 sealed artifact, I'll most likely have become Ammon. The true creator knows a clue to the 3rd characteristic of the Attendant of Mysteries. His divine kingdom and holy residence are in the forsaken land of the gods. These 2 might be related somehow. The 2 sets of miracle invoker characteristics and an Attendant of Mysteries characteristics are highly likely to be in the forsaken land of the gods. I wonder which one is in the Nois ruins. Yes, the true creator should only know a clue, and not its exact location. Otherwise, He would have obtained that attendant of mysteries beyond her characteristic before the War of the Four Emperors and effectively increased his subordinate strength. In other words, the attendant of mysteries beyond her characteristic is something even a true deity can't obtain quickly, and it's necessary to search for it. It might not be so easy for Amon to come across it, allowing him to set up a trap. If the danger within the ruins were only recently found, having just been transplanted, it would match this trait. From the looks of it, I still have to make a trip. However, I have to be careful enough. The danger comes from Amon and also from the ruins. I'll do a divination first, then I'll observe and gather intelligence from a distance. I won't enter blindly and will be patient enough. Klein conjured a pen and paper, and was about to write the corresponding divination statement, when he suddenly thought of something, and decided to make another confirmation. He drew a complicated symbol that was a mixture of concealment and mystery prying. He threw it into the crimson star representing the magician. With Gehrman Sparrow's image and tone, he asked her to question a Rhodes. Backlund East Borough. Furs, who was about to move houses, drew the curtains and lit a candle. She set up a mirror and found Zio to act as a bystander. She then drew the symbol that Mr. World had given her. In the room, the environment gradually turned dark as cold winds stirred, causing the two to tremble. The surface of the mirror suddenly rippled, forming ancient dark red faceac text. You have summoned the greater Rhodes. You have to abide by the corresponding rules. You have to answer a question for every question asked. If you lie or refuse to answer, you will be punished. All right, Furs, who had been warned, calmly replied. Following that, she asked curiously, where can one obtain the main ingredient of the miracle invoker potion? On the surface of the mirror, dark red words appeared one after another as other lines vanished. They answered the question in detail. It's basically the same as Will's answer. Above the gray fog, through the crimson star representing Miss Magician, Klein watched the specific process and nodded in disappointment. After Furs memorized the answer, she said nervously, "It's your turn to ask." The dark red words changed and formed a new sentence. Have you had an erotic dream in the past year? Phew. Thankfully, it's still okay. Furs heaved a sigh of relief and said, yes. This was human nature. She didn't feel that there was anything to be ashamed of. Following that, she raised the second question. Do you have any suggestions on the matter regarding obtaining the main ingredient of the miracle invoker? Rhodes dispersed the dark red text and used silver colors to form new words. The Abraham family still holds the Apprentice Pathways Sequence 2 Planeswalker Potion formula, as well as the corresponding powerful sealed artifacts. A total of 2 of them. The Aurora Order also has 1. Klein's eyes lit up as he thought of a new possibility. Is that so? Furs frowned slightly and said, it's your turn to ask a question. The silver color on the surface of the mirror faded away as dark red colors formed a sentence. Other than you, who else was the star of your erotic dream? Furs gaped as her face flushed red. Chapter 1179 Preparations both ways. At that moment, Furs felt her cheeks burning as she stiffened. She didn't even dare to turn her head to look at her friend. She realized that she had severely underestimated the bottom line of the magic mirror. After stuttering for a moment, Furs recalled Mr. World's reminder and closed her eyes. I choose to accept the punishment. A silvery white bolt of lightning fell from the air in the room, but the moment it appeared, the lightning vanished without a trace like it was a hallucination. The dark red words on the surface of the mirror were dyed silver as they were quickly replaced with new content. The question and answer game will end here today. Goodbye. Without waiting for Furs to open her eyes, and before Zio could react, the rippling light in the mirror instantly calmed down. The gloom and darkness in the room shattered as they were swallowed by the light of the candle. Wasn't there supposed to be a punishment? Furs waited for a few seconds before opening her eyes slightly. She looked at the mirror that had returned to normal, and then at Zio, who was watching by the sidelines. Zio pointed at the top of her head and said, there was lightning that smote at you, but it disappeared halfway. Also, the magic mirror had already left. The magic mirror was only joking? That's not right. The warning I received was that the questions would be rather embarrassing, and the punishments would be rather heavy. Could it be that Mr. Fool protected me? Furs rubbed her right cheek as she made a guess. Perhaps. Zio nodded in agreement with her friend. Just as Furs heaved a sigh of relief and rejoiced, she suddenly realized that Zio was looking at her earnestly. What's the matter? Furs's heart skipped a beat. Zio asked thoughtfully, in that erotic dream of yours, who was the main lead? Haha, who would remember such a dream from so long ago? Besides, aren't dreams blurry and unclear? Furs forced a smile. Zio tersely acknowledged. If that's the case, why didn't you answer with that just now? I was nervous. I was too nervous. Furs glanced at the luggage that she had finished packing and said, It's time for us to move. I miss having a fireplace. As she spoke, she walked towards her luggage. It was only at this moment that she realized that, at times, the outcome was similar whether she answered the magic mirror's question or not. Is this the social death that was mentioned by Gehrman Sparrow? I really want to bury my head into the ground. Furs continuously took deep breaths in an attempt to calm her burning face and embarrassed heart. In the ancient palace above the fog, Klein threw the sea god scepter back into the junk pile and scoffed at Rhodes's act. Despite knowing that I was the one who sent someone to summon it, it actually dared to raise such a question. Only when I stopped the punishment did it hurriedly change its attitude and leave in a panic. It sure had fun. However, its answer has given me a new train of thought. I really don't need to restrict myself to the path of a miracle invoker. The second blasphemy slate is most likely from the City of Silver's creator, and is now in the hands of Adam. Although Amon and his brother are mutually staying away from each other's affairs and aren't on especially good terms, they have worked together before. I don't believe that he has never seen that blasphemy slate. If that's the case, he is definitely aware of the miracle invoker's ritual, and can guess that I'll be bringing the City of Silver out of the forsaken land of the gods. When that happens, he wouldn't even need to put much effort into tracking me. He just needs to wait at the Giant King's court. Yes, I can't go according to the enemy's expectations, especially since this is a god of deceit and the god of mischief. Countless accidents will happen. If it's because of my participation that the City of Silver's thousands of years of hope ends up being destroyed, then it'll be completely contradictory to my original intentions. The problem with a planeswalker is that I might hear Mr. Door's ravings, and will suffer the scrutiny and corruption from the cosmos that's worse than sequence 2 angels from other pathways. Of course, this isn't completely unacceptable. Also, will I need to pay back the 2 resurrection chances that Sapphira Castle gave me? That's still fine since I'll definitely transfer back to being an attendant of mysteries at sequence 1, because Mr. Door has already blocked off the advancement path of the apprentice pathway. He is at least in control of the uniqueness and 2 sets of sequence 1 beyonder characteristics, perhaps even all 3. It's not necessary for me to switch to Planeswalker, but I have to make the necessary preparations. When my options increase, even if Amon tries to stop me, the difficulty of burying a trap in advance will increase significantly. Only then can I become an angel while under the pressure of a king of angels. Yes, I'll stay on the fence for now. I'll prepare for the Miracle Invoker advancement, while preparing for the Planeswalker advancement. I'll determine which pathway to take based on the actual situation when the time comes. Having come to a decision, Klein felt refreshed. His mind was abnormally active, and he quickly came up with a preliminary plan. I'm not in a hurry to ask Miss Magician's teacher about the Planeswalker potion formula, and the corresponding Grade 0 sealed artifact. This will scare the Abraham family, making them suspect that Miss Magician worships some evil god, and has joined some terrible organization. With their current situation, there's a high chance that they won't reply. They will change their identities, move, and sever all ties. Yes, the head of the Saint of Secrets, Bodhi's, will make a fine gift. Regardless of whether the Abraham family gives the Worm of Cosmos, this matter will have to be placed on the agenda. I hope Miss Justice can digest the Dreamwalker potion as soon as possible. I hope that Ma'am Hermit will be prepared. I also hope that the 2 ladies, Miss Magician and Miss Judgment, will be able to improve before the operation. Right, according to what Miss Magician said, Saint of Secrets Bodhi's is a defector of the Abraham family, and the Aurora Order holds a Grade 0 sealed artifact of the Apprentice Pathway. That's interesting. Perhaps I don't need to contact the Abraham family. I might be able to get what I want from the Saint of Secrets. I have to remind Ma'am Hermit that Bodhi's might be carrying a Grade 0 sealed artifact, so confirmation has to be made before the operation. If that Grade 0 sealed artifact isn't in the hands of the Saint of Secrets, then I'll probably have to face the Angel of Fate Ouroboros to get it. No, Grade 0 sealed artifacts are terrifying to begin with. It's one of the sources of danger. Phew, I'll first wait for Miss Magician's teacher to reply, and see if the Abraham family is averse to any mention of the Worm of Cosmos. As he thought of this, Klein suddenly felt a hint of self-deprecation. He felt that he and the Aurora Order appeared to be destined enemies. They often had all kinds of interactions. When the operation begins, the Aurora Order will definitely shout in their hearts. Why is it you again? Why is it us again? After letting out a breath, he gathered his thoughts and conjured the world Gehrman Sparrow. He replied to Miss Magician, who had reported the answer. Following that, the world prayed once again, requesting Mr. Fool to forward his request to Danitz. On a certain island in the Fog Sea, Danitz, who was waiting for the Golden Dream, turned his head to look at Anderson and chuckled. I'm going to summon Gehrman Sparrow's messenger. Anderson pricked up his brows and scoffed. You're qualified to consume the Conspirer potion. You were the one who made it too obvious. Even I could sense that you were afraid of that messenger. Danitz felt even more pleased with himself as he said humbly. Anderson suddenly guffawed. Why do you not suspect that I'm pretending to be afraid? I'm just trying to find a reasonable excuse to avoid hearing things I shouldn't be hearing. Dog's hit, do you think I'll believe the lies you came up with in a hurry? Danitz was almost convinced. Anderson spread his hands and walked to the door. You've gathered all the materials of the Conspirer potion. Remember to remind Gehrman to not forget my iron-blooded night potion formula. Danitz waved his hand impatiently, indicating that he hadn't forgotten. After Anderson walked out of the room and closed the door, Danitz immediately set up a ritual and summoned the messenger holding 4 blonde, red-eyed heads. Seeing the 8 eyes look over at the same time, Danitz's chest immediately retracted. He forced a smile and handed out a gold coin. Ma'am, Gehrman Sparrow wants me to tell you that he's fine. He's now in the Forsaken Land of the Gods. Wait, what did I say? The Forsaken Land of the Gods? As a crew member of Vice Admiral Iceberg, Danitz's knowledge of mysticism was still adequate. After a momentary pause, his pupils clearly dilated. All right. Rionette Tinker bit down on the gold coin and answered immediately. Then, she entered the void and vanished from the room. After reporting this to Gehrman Sparrow, Danitz received the Iron-Blooded Knight's potion formula and new orders. Prepare some local delicacies and sacrifice them to sea god Calvetua. Isn't this mission a little odd? Danitz muttered to himself, but he didn't dare to raise any questions. He quickly tidied up the altar, found a parchment, and wrote down the supplementary ingredients and corresponding ritual in the Iron-Blooded Knight potion formula. Following that, he opened the door and handed the parchment to Anderson. Form a team of at least 30 people. The stronger the team's strength and chemistry, the better the ritual's effects. Anderson unfolded the parchment in front of Danitz and read it. As he read, his brows gradually furrowed. If the team's chemistry is to build upon the idea of killing me, the captain, the ritual is rather simple. Without waiting for Danitz to mock him, a burning white flame appeared from his fingertip and burned the parchment. Anderson chuckled. I need to go back to my homeland to find an opportunity. That place is currently being invaded by Potter, and war is always the best place for building up and training a team. With a pause, he looked at Danitz and said with a smile, I've prepared some questions for you. They're in my room. Once you become a conspirer, you can try doing it and see if your intelligence has improved. Dog's hit. Are you trying to trick me into reading all the books in your room? Danitz was almost moved, but he immediately understood that something was wrong. No matter how high his intelligence was, he wouldn't be able to solve the questions if he hadn't read the textbooks. Not bad. It only took you 3 seconds this time to grasp the crux of the matter. If it were in the past, you would have really believed me. Anderson praised with a smile as he turned around and left the inn. 1180 different effects in the forsaken land of the gods. At night when the frequency of lightning had dropped to a very low frequency. 2 slices of white bread and a piece of barbecued meat is pretty good after all. The sweet and sour desserts from the Fog Sea are better than I had expected. After swallowing the last mouthful of food, Klein sighed in amazement from the bottom of his heart. He then threw the remaining packaging into the darkness. After all, there was no concept of environmental protection here, nor was there a rubbish bin. Of course, he had removed his connection with those items ahead of time, just like how he would head over to Sapphira Castle to perform sterilization every time he abandoned a marionette. This was to prevent Amon's avatars from locking onto him with them. Lifeless objects won't be transferred into a concealed state by the darkness here. Klein raised the lantern that Danitz had sacrificed, and he illuminated the abandoned items. It was only after he filled his stomach that he was in the mood to try out the dangerous things he had previously divined. Amidst the flickering dim yellow light, Klein reached his right hand out into the air, and dragged out another projection of himself. It was another version of him from the historical void, one who was also holding onto a lantern. Klein entered the grayish-white fog 1 second later, allowing his projection's consciousness to awaken. The projection was surrounded by a group of monsters. Amidst the endless darkness, it opened its mouth, planning to recite the name, Ammonizes. He didn't manage to make a single sound, as though the words he wanted to say had been concealed. Indeed, it's as I expected. Wearing a silk half-top hat and a black trench coat, Klein slowly took a deep breath. Looking at the lantern that emitted faint yellow light, he suddenly chanted in Jotun, Leotaro. Before he could finish his sentence, more than 100 lightning bolts warped as if they were responding to being summoned. They instantly blanketed the area. There was no time for him to dodge. Even if he had switched places with a marionette, he would still be within the attack range. Amidst the brightening of silvery white light, he collapsed to the ground. His body was charred as he convulsed violently, as though he had become a gigantic piece of coal. Then his figure rapidly dissipated as the illusion vanished. Wearing a real top hat, clothed in an Intis-styled windbreaker and carrying a simple lantern, Klein immediately returned to reality and continued proceeding forward as if nothing had happened. After walking for a while, his figure suddenly turned blurry and clear. Following that, Klein opened his mouth again and read out a name in Jotun. Oh, just as he produced the first syllable, a transparent flame burst out from his body, instantly reducing him to ashes, not giving him a chance to switch places with his marionette. Klein's figure appeared once again. He pressed his hat and walked calmly on the hill filled with strange plants. Haraburgen. Badheil. Omabella. There's nothing out of the ordinary. There are no traces of the corresponding divine powers left in the vicinity of the City of Silver. Medici, Ouroboros, Sasrar. These are of no use, neither one of them are deities. I thought that the situation at Afternoon Town and the Giant King's court was due to special circumstances. Using Sasrar's true name outside can activate the powers of degeneration from the forsaken land of the gods. As a king of angels with the uniqueness, Red Angel is also considered half a true god. Yet there aren't any traces left of him. How shameful for a person. No, shameful for a king of angels. As Klein walked down the hill, he followed his spiritual intuition and headed northwest where the city ruins of Nois were. He would occasionally take a detour, occasionally using flaming jump, and he didn't follow the route that the City of Silver had used to explore to reach their destination. Backlund, late at night. Feeling that she had digested the potion a little more, Audrey very eagerly used dream traversal to leave her mansion and to enter the various dreams of the surrounding area. Knowing what the current situation was like, she had a strong desire to become a demigod. Just like that, she suddenly saw someone familiar. This was a noble lady who had a good relationship with her. She was 29 years old and had married a viscount 2 years ago. At this moment, the lady's room was filled with rose petals. The bed was white, and there was a heart-shaped ring placed on it. And she could hear knocking sounds from the outside. With flushed cheeks, the lady quickly walked over and opened the window. A man wearing a black iron mask and a dark cloak leaped in. He hugged the lady and whispered, "I'll take you away from your suffering." Then, The two of them started to wrap their bodies around one another as they rolled into bed. As a dreamwalker who was working hard to digest the potion, Audrey had long seen similar scenes. She had experienced the phase of feeling embarrassed, and she cited how everyone's dreams were full of imagination. At that moment, she didn't lose her composure at all. She maintained the etiquette of a spectator, as though she was witnessing an overly intense play. After a brief examination, she discovered a problem. The man wearing the black iron mask wasn't the wife's spouse, but more like a particular playboy in the aristocratic circles. Is this a reflection of what's hidden in her heart? Audrey muttered to herself in an academic manner while analyzing the dream. Following that, she traversed into the dream beside her out of curiosity. This dream corresponded to the noble wife's husband, the Viscount. In the dream, this Viscount was busy attending a discussion at the House of Lords. Later, he was chased by an earl with a revolver. The latter claimed that he had tricked his daughter. After escaping to a safe zone, the Viscount found his female secretary to vent his fear. Audrey couldn't help but leave the dream, wanting to see the state the Viscount and his wife were in. In the bedroom under the illumination of the crimson moonlight, the Viscount was hugging his wife on the huge white bed. His wife was hugging him and sleeping in a very intimate manner. Yes, I have to realize that everyone has a dark side to them. It's just a dream that they've had. If conviction, for a mere instantaneous thought, was carried out, then everyone would descend into hell, and no one will be spared, including myself. I can control my dark side, preventing it from ever being realized in the real world. To most people, that's already considered excellent. Audrey increasingly felt that acting as a dreamwalker was a way to question and hone one's mind and body. She entered the dreamscape again and traversed to another area. Not long after, she arrived at a warm room. There was a dining table placed over a thick carpet. At the seat of honor was a white-haired old lady. To her sides were a middle-aged couple and 3 children who were not of age. They were all enjoying the delicious food, chatting and laughing. It was dark outside the room. The strong winds made the glass groan and thump as they seemed to brew a horrifying sensation before the disaster struck. What is the owner of this dream bothered about? Audrey retreated from the dream and tried to find an answer from the real world to verify her hypothesis. She then saw a small bed and the white-haired old lady. There were photo frames on the bedside table of the old lady. They were either wrapped in black cloth or white flowers, consisting of a middle-aged couple and 3 underage children. Audrey silently turned her head to look out the window, only to see that there were ruins nearby, ones left behind by an explosion. The young noble lady pursed her lips and suddenly returned to the old lady's dreams. She didn't stop the disaster that might happen. She only conjured a chair and sat on it. She looked at the happy and warm family in a solemn manner. Amidst the howling wind and glass, the room was brightly lit. There was the fragrance of food and laughter everywhere. Audrey had already concluded one of the acting principles of Dreamwalker. A traveler of a dream enters, takes in the sights, and records, never interfering. That was a spectator. In St. Samuel Cathedral, having been summoned by Bishop Anthony Stephen, Leonard slowly walked up the spiral staircase under the sunlight that shone in through the stained glass. Suddenly he said with a suppressed voice, "Old man, that secret gathering is about to begin again. Are you really planning to attempt to enter the treasures left behind by the Jacob family at the end of the month? I'm not sure yet, but this is an opportunity." At the very least, Amon's main body is being tied down by the matter regarding Sapphira Castle. He won't suddenly appear. In Leonard's mind, Pallas Zoros replied with a slightly hoarse voice. However, I'm more inclined to reveal the news of the treasure trove. I want the people at the gathering to adventure and explore it. We'll stay in the vicinity and observe the situation, taking what I need from their hands. Leonard was taken aback as he whispered, "Old man, isn't that too sinister?" This was using the members of the Hermits of Fate as tools to step into a trap. How naive, childish. You can tell them all the details, and let them decide whether they want to go on their own. Pallas scoffed. Leonard didn't mention it again. Instead he asked, "Old man, when can I become a demigod?" Pallas chuckled. "If you can obtain a spirit at the level of your former colleague's messenger, You'll be able to digest the potion by the beginning of next year. However, it's better to act according to my instructions. Engage in a deeper level of acting. Wait till the second half of next year. You'll have the qualifications to try for sequence 4. Of course, I'm not sure if the Church of Evernight will give you the potion and hold a ritual for you. That high-ranking deacon named Casimir Christet had to wait several years before he truly became a demigod when war truly broke out, didn't he? Leonard nodded and asked thoughtfully. Old man, can you act as a spirit to help me digest the potion? Your level should be higher than Klein's messenger. Pallas Zoros fell silent for a few seconds before he chortled. What a great idea. How about I help you digest the potion? How? Leonard knew that old man was mocking him, but he couldn't help but ask. I'll deeply parasitize you, gaining full control over your body. Pallas snapped back. As he spoke, Leonard came to the door of the Backlund Diocese's archbishop. He immediately shut his mouth and raised his right hand to knock on the door. Come in. Anthony Stephen glanced at Leonard, who had opened the door. You can release that vampire behind Cheney's gate. Chapter 1181 Nois Ancient City. Upon hearing the bishop's instructions, Leonard was first taken aback before he inwardly sighed. Mr. Fool's prophecy was really accurate. No, it's not a prophecy. He was already aware of everything. Leonard quickly reined in his thoughts and followed the procedures to get Bishop St. Anthony to give him an official document. Then he returned underground and brought 2 members into Cheney's gate. After waiting for the keepers to check the documents, he came to Emlyn White's room, which was illuminated with shining silver candles that were covered with engraved patterns. He opened the heavy stone door with a brass key. Ghostly blue light entered the cell, stabbing Emlyn White's eyes to the point of him instinctively closing his eyes. His face was much paler than before, and his body was much thinner. He exuded a feeling that a gust of wind would lift him up at any moment. Thinking of Mr. Fool's answer, Emlyn suddenly felt confident in his current situation. Without opening his eyes, he slowly stood up and chuckled. I knew you would take the initiative to send me out. Would you be disappointed if I said that it was just a routine investigation? Leonard lampooned inwardly and replied without any expression. I'll give you 30 seconds. If you don't leave Cheney's gate within this period, I'll take it as you voluntarily choosing to stay behind. As a slightly more senior Nighthawk and a captain of a Red Gloves team for several months, Leonard had rich experience in dealing with prisoners. Emlyn's expression froze. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but he ultimately maintained his silence. He walked past Leonard and his 2 teammates and walked out of Cheney's gate. Outside, he suddenly shuddered, as if he wanted to purge the chill in his body. Once you return, getting some sunlight would fix you up. Oh, the sun is a rare commodity in Backlund's winter, and you vampires don't enjoy sunbathing. Aren't you an apothecary? You can concoct some medicine from the sun domain yourself. Seeing this, Leonard casually reminded him. Emlyn's condition wasn't the best. On the one hand, he hadn't drunk any spirituality containing human blood for days. He could only rely on the blood of animals as a substitute. On the other hand, it was because he had stayed behind Cheney's gate for too long. The power of Evernight that supported the seal had eaten into him a little, making him require the effects of medicine from the sun domain to remove the residual effects. As a potions professor, Emlyn was aware of his physical and mental condition. He didn't retort or nod. He only emphasized the word sanguine before asking, Where's Father Utravsky? Visit website our list novel. He still needs to stay a little while longer. I hope this bloody war will end soon. Don't worry, we'll let him come out twice a week to get some sunlight. As for which days they'll be, it'll depend on the weather in Backlund. Leonard gave a simple response before sending Emlyn White to the ground and onto the streets. Emlyn hesitated for a moment before asking again, Where's the nearest hospital? What do you want to do? Leonard asked in a professional manner. Get a blood transfusion. Emlyn raised his chin slightly, trying his best not to change his expression. Blood transfusion. More like drinking blood. Leonard didn't call him out. He pointed in one direction and gave him the address. After watching the Sanguine Viscount leave, he returned underground and began to discuss a recent case with his team members. After several days of traveling, Klein finally arrived near the Nois city ruins in the north. This was equally a desolate plain. The dried riverbed left traces of itself on the ground. Looking at the dark, shadowy city that was filled with a thin fog, he was in no hurry to get close. Instead, he found a hidden spot and muttered the honorific name of Mr. Fool. Following that, he took 4 steps counterclockwise and recited the incantation before entering the world above the gray fog. To return to Sapphira Castle with just a thought, he needed the prayers of the Tarot Club members to stack together, forming a strong and firm anchor. That way, it would provide the Fool with the sufficient summoning power. With the help of the prayer light, Klein used his true vision to check the situation of the Nois ruins from afar. He discovered that the thin fog was slowly dissipating, but it couldn't completely dissipate. On the surface of the city, there wasn't a single spirit body thread. The people who were dressed in linen robes or animal hides were lying in different spots on the streets. They weren't as lively and busy as the time the City of Silver's expedition team visited. After the angel or sealed artifact that occupied this city discovered that their whereabouts were exposed, they chose to migrate? As Klein made a guess based on the situation in front of him, he retracted his gaze and looked at the grayish-white fog that held up Sapphira Castle. He was trying to prevent the miracle invoker, or attendant of mysteries, or the corresponding sealed artifact from hiding in the historical void and ambushing the beyonders of the ancient Nois city. He didn't wish to directly encounter a cluster of translucent maggots that twisted into a huge vortex when he leaped into the fog of history, nor did he wish to be pursued by those terrifying tentacles. The ambush that Zeratul had laid for him still left Klein feeling a lingering sense of fear. From time to time he would have nightmares, hoping to seek Miss Justice for another round of treatment for psychological trauma. This stimulus was worse than seeing his marionette, Anuni, wear a monocle in front of him while his body remained completely immobile. This was because he had implicated the Hounds of Fulgrim. After confirming that the historical void was safe, Klein returned to the real world. He stretched out his hand, grabbed, and pulled out his former self. This former self was also wearing a silk half-top hat, a black trench coat, and holding a simple glass lantern. In the next second, he jumped into the grayish-white fog and followed the illuminated spots in the historical void, running all the way to a period before the first epoch, in that city of a long-dead civilization. To him, this was a very ingenious safe house. This was because aside from him, no scholar of yore could trace back to this lost piece of history. Of course, to him, coming all the way here had required him to expend a lot of his spirituality. He could only stay there for another 15 minutes at most, and that was only if he didn't make any burdening attempts at summoning historical void projections. After hiding his true body, Klein's projection in the real world moved forward, quickly arriving outside the Nois ruins. He didn't blindly approach or enter. After circling to a small mound opposite the dried riverbed, he raised his right hand and summoned his original marionette, the cold Earl of the fallen Konas Kilgore with dark blue eyes. Konas's body squirmed and instantly transformed into Gehrman Sparrow. Then he reached out and took out a lantern from the historical void. The historical projection who summoned a historical projection had disordered the distance under the dim yellow light of the lantern. In a few steps he arrived outside Nois City alone. With the lantern in hand, he passed through the rotting buildings and passed through the thin fog before entering the ruins. Compared to using his true vision, above the gray fog, actual contact made him discover more details. The humans and monsters lying in different spots had signs of decay, as though they had been abandoned for some time. Some of them sat on chairs under the eaves of the house, others slumped beside stoves. Some held moldy bread while others held hands. There were some leaning against the walls and sitting on the ground, their lips pressed against a bone flute. This allowed Klein to imagine the situation in the city back when they were living. Some of them were slacking off and resting. Some were baking food, and others were shopping along the streets. Others were focused on music as some came and went, laughing nonstop. There were also others fighting monsters in an arena. This was such a lively and bustling scene, but in reality, everyone had already died and were no longer in possession of their souls. They were only repeating predetermined actions. And one day, this strange scene froze with time, and everyone collapsed without any warning. A city formed by marionettes, the most realistic theater. Back then, the foggy town was in a similar situation. Although I'm also a seer, I still have to say that in terms of horror, terror, and bizarreness, our pathway is definitely ranked amongst the top 3. Could it be that I'll be acting in the same manner in the future? Attendant of mysteries? With the lantern in hand, Klein walked through the streets that were littered with corpses. He followed his spiritual intuition and headed for the ancient Nois city center. The situation here made him believe that the person who had once ruled the Nois ruins definitely had enough intelligence. After the City of Silver's expedition team broke the peace and serenity here, the entity didn't choose to kill or destroy any clues. Instead, this place was abandoned without hesitation before the entity migrated elsewhere. The reason why the City of Silver wasn't silenced probably had to do with an Amon parasite following behind. Yes, it could also be because of the true creator. As he casually let his thoughts wander, Klein quickly arrived at a relatively intact cathedral. Inside the cathedral stood a statue of a demonic wolf with 8 legs. It was covered with short and dark hair. There was a tuft of grayish-white fur at the top of the statue head. Its pitch-black pupils covered at least 3/4 of its eyes. It's not Phlegria, the dark demonic wolf that occasionally appeared in the third epoch, the god of wishes? He has been in the forsaken land of the gods for thousands of years, and has finally found that sequence one beyonder characteristic? Just as this thought flashed through his mind, Klein suddenly heard footsteps coming, resounding one after another. Standing sideways, he immediately cast his gaze outside the cathedral. He saw a figure slowly walking through the thin fog before its outline quickly formed. He was nearly 2-3 meters tall, with a slight hunch to his back. With grizzled hair, wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, and a scar at the corners of his mouth, he looked like an old priest or bishop while donning a long black clergyman's robe. His dark brown eyes were calm, unlike the monsters deep in the darkness who were bloodthirsty and zero intelligence. However, in the long, quiet night of low-frequency lightning, this clergyman didn't carry any animal hide lanterns or have any fire lit. He just quietly walked through the thin fog. Chapter 1182 The Holy Word. Although it had been less than a week since he entered the forsaken land of the gods, Klein had long gotten a good understanding of the place through Little Sunday. He knew that normal humans, even saints, had to use fire to create light in the darkness. Otherwise, it was very easy for them to encounter dangerous monsters lurking in the depths of the darkness, or be secretly devoured, disappearing without a trace, never to be found again. And at that moment, the elderly clergyman wasn't carrying any animal hide lanterns. Instead, he passed through the fog in the darkness and slowly entered the cathedral that was illuminated by the dim yellow light. If it wasn't for his deep and calm eyes that didn't show any signs of madness, Klein's first reaction would have been that he had encountered a special monster. Of course, having a normal person's state of mind and being immersed in darkness were contradictory traits. Any living creature with any semblance of normal intelligence could easily come up with a conclusion that this person might be even more terrifying than special monsters. Klein had only met one person who could pass through the darkness without being affected by it while having sufficient intelligence. Blasphemer Amon. Sensing that the faint yellow light was reflected on his face, the tall black-robed clergyman with a slight hunch to his back stopped in his tracks. Looking at the demonic wolf statue, he hoarsely asked, "Where did the owner of this city go?" Klein was the kind of person who would try his best to resolve a problem peacefully if a fight with a stranger could be avoided. As he raised his guard, he calmly replied, "I don't know where either. I just entered the city. Who knows where the owner went?" Just as he said that, the entire cathedral dimmed. A thin fog surged in like a tidal wave from the outside, drowning the interior. The lantern in Klein's hand failed miserably at illuminating the windows and the situation at the door. It was dark outside, and nothing could be seen. In the blink of an eye, the cathedral that worshipped the demonic wolf statue seemed to be isolated from Nois City. It was unknown where it was located. Klein's pupils dilated slightly as he looked at the clergyman with wrinkles and white hair. He asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" The hunched clergyman replied in a condescending manner, "I'm an attendant by the Lord's side. I'm the angel of the Holy Word, Steph. I walk this land of the past that the Lord had passed on." doing so on his behalf in search of the blasphemer, hidden in the darkness. As he spoke, the elder's figure expanded to a height of 4 meters tall. Behind him, black illusory feathers appeared. Their shadows intersected and formed 4 pairs of gloomy but holy wings. Angel of the Holy Word, Steph. An attendant by the Lord's side. Land of the past. This is the blessed of the true Creator, the angel of faith's subordinate. A member of the Rose Redemption? It's no wonder that he can walk in the darkness. He has the power of degeneration protecting him. That evil god is still searching for the beyonder characteristic of the attendant of mysteries? Klein had no choice but to raise his head and lock eyes with this clergyman who, despite wearing a black robe, had 4 pairs of angel wings on his back. This high-level existence angel's form remained wrinkled with grizzled hair. There was a sense of contradiction in everything about him. Pretending that he had never made an enemy of the Aurora Order, he calmly said, "That blasphemer has long fled. I'm also searching for him." After staring at Klein for 2 seconds, the angel of the Holy Word asked in a low voice, "Who are you?" It won't be convenient saying it out directly. Klein sighed and smiled. "I'm a lonely traveler." After he gave this reply, he suddenly felt an extreme sense of darkness developing within him. It then sank down and merged with the shadow created by the lantern. The pitch-black figure abruptly warped and came to life, stretching itself out to become another Gehrman sparrow, one with sinister and ferocious eyes and a solitary demeanor. Klein's pupils constricted. Without any hesitation, he reached out his right hand and grabbed outward at thin air. At this point, if he hadn't guessed that Steph was using his answer, he should have joined the Aurora Order and made the true Creator his God. At this moment he already knew what it meant by angel of the Holy Word. This was clearly the angel of the evil word. By using a person's reply, he could extract a portion of the ambiguity or expand on it to create the effect of spirit language. When Klein said that he didn't know where the owner of the city had gone, Steph extracted the words, "I don't know where I went," trapping himself and isolating himself from the outside world. When this angel revealed his identity, every word was enhancing his level and strength. When Klein answered who he was, it ended up separating a lonely traveler from him. From the moment he appeared in Nois City, there was a strong sense of malice in the black-robed Steph. And just as Klein was attempting to summon a particular image from the historical void, the sinister Gehrman sparrow seemed to share the same thoughts as he did. He too grabbed at the same projection, canceling each other out. Seeing that his powers as a scholar of yore had been restrained, Klein's eyes narrowed. Without any hesitation, he opened his mouth and said a word in Jotun. But in the next second, the word was stolen. Standing at about 4 meters tall, the stooped angel of the Holy Word, Steph, had at some point in time grown a head covered in blood on his left shoulder. It looked very similar to him, but was much younger, a person who was approximately in the 40s. Around the head were 2 skinless arms that had mangled flesh. They had grazed different souls and had used beyonder powers that could steal thoughts. At the same time, another bloody head grew on Steph's right shoulder, one that looked to be in his 20s. Amongst the 3 heads, one grazed souls and stole Klein's thoughts, while the other was staring coldly at the target, deepening the self-awareness of the lonely traveler. The last one opened his mouth and said, "You lie. You are the person who destroyed the Son of God's descent ritual and interfered with the Lord's descent twice. You are one of the targets I'm looking for." The corners of Klein's mouth twitched as he calmly said a word in Jotun, "Leotero." This was the true name of the Lord of Storms. The reason why this thought wasn't stolen was because he had lined up his subsequent actions. The lineup was filled with the same content. It didn't matter if the first thought was stolen, as it didn't affect the subsequent thoughts. This was a precious experience he had gained from fighting Amon. Of course, if he were to meet Amon again, he suspected that such a method might not work. Once the god of mischief was prepared, he would definitely come up with something new. As soon as he finished speaking, the eyes of the angel of the Holy Word angel, Steph, lit up with bolts of silver lightning. They covered the entirety of Nois City, and they tore through the darkness that enveloped the cathedral. They tore apart all the corruption, concealment, darkness, vileness, and evil. Inside, Klein and the sinister Gehrman sparrow were situated at the eye of the lightning storm. Without even a grunt, they dissipated. Then the terrifying silvery white, twisted electric bolt snaked the area and swallowed the demonic wolf statue as well as the angel of holy words, Steph. Amidst the dull rumbling sounds, the ancient city of Nois completely collapsed, becoming a true ruin. At the opposite side of the dried-up riverbed, Klein's historical projection quickly faded away, returning to the real world. Right on the heels of that, Klein immediately used Flaming Jump to distance himself from the Nois ruins. During this process, he pulled out a few paper figurines and made them into angels to cover his tracks. The desolate plains returned to its state of dead silence once again. After an unknown period of time, the ruins where the cathedral stood shook. Steph slowly stood up amidst crumbling dust and rock. His completely white hair had thinned again, and his deep black clergyman's robe became tattered. The angel of the holy word left Nois' ancient city in silence, got his bearings and walked deep into the darkness. Half a day later, a figure approached the city's ruins from another direction. It was none other than Klein, who had made a huge detour. He hadn't had the chance to check the ancient city of Nois previously, and his return this time was motivated by the hope of finding actual clues of that existence. At a relatively far distance away, Klein repeated his observations above the gray fog, summoned the historical projection, and hid in ancient times, using the projection to summon another historical projection. After finishing his preparations, he stepped into Nois once again and returned to the cathedral in absolute silence. Along the way, the corpses that had been lying dead on the ground had either turned to ash or turned to charred remains, devoid of that creepy and harrowing feeling. That fellow named Steph didn't die. From the looks of it, the remnant divine powers of storm here can only injure an angel. Klein stopped in front of the ruined cathedral and muttered to himself wistfully. Of course, he only found it a little regretful. He didn't expect to finish off an angel so easily. As he swept his gaze, he saw a few pieces of the demonic wolf statue. The surface of it was dark black, and the insides were dark red, nothing like commonly seen stone. These stones must be extraordinary for them to be used by that dark demonic wolf for his statue. Furthermore, they don't look like something produced in the vicinity. Perhaps I can seek out the area the dark demonic wolf hid prior to Nois City by investigating them. As a miracle invoker, or even an attendant of mysteries, that dark demonic wolf must be good at covering his tracks. It'll be very difficult to track his whereabouts directly, but if I can find most of the areas he had hid previously, I should be able to gain insight into his habits and style. Once I know a person's past, I can predict his future. As he thought, he took 2 steps forward, bent down, and attempted to pick up a fragment of the statue. At that moment, a charred hand suddenly reached out and blocked his finger. From the corner of his eye, he saw a charred corpse standing up. The charred corpse's other hand held onto a crystal monocle and wore it on its left eye. Amon. Left eye. Klein's heart tightened at first before a strong sense of doubt and suspicion surfaced within him. In the next second, the charred corpse smiled and said, "Sorry, I wore it on the wrong side." As it spoke, it took off the monocle and moved it to its right eye. Chapter 1183 Klein's Advantage. Once again, Klein understood why Amon was the god of mischief. At that moment, he didn't even have the desire to lampoon. All he wanted was to immediately end the historical projection and escape from the Amon, no almonds, in front of him. The charred corpse that had been parasitized wiped the soot from its face. Before Klein disappeared, it said with a smile, "There's no rush. You are just a projection from the historical void. I can't really parasitize you. And you should know very well that I'm not alone. It's difficult for you to launch an effective counterattack." With a simple lantern in hand, Klein thought silently. He picked up a piece of the black sculpture fragment that had red insides, and he cautiously asked, "What exactly do you want to say?" At that moment, Amon had already changed back into his appearance. The only problem was that his skin remained darker. He adjusted his crystal monocle and chuckled. "You know that I'm aware that you're searching for that dark demonic wolf in an attempt to obtain the miracle invoker's beyonder characteristic from him. I happen to be very interested as well. Why don't we play another game and see who can get to it first?" "What's the point of that? It's not like I won't pursue it or think of snatching it if I don't play this game. After 2 seconds of silence, he shook his head. I refuse. He had no intention of listening to what conditions Amon would offer. The more he heard from a top cheat, the more he would suffer. Amon shook his head without a hint of anger. You'll regret this. I had originally planned to use a Miracle Invoker's Beyonder characteristic to exchange for Sapphira Castle with you, and also give you a period of time to transfer the secret gathering you organized. And now, I can only consider stealing your fate directly. I will carry the burden of the corrosion from the source. Yes, although it's dangerous, it's still thrilling enough. I'm already prepared to accept it, and see who will eventually control the flow. With my father's experience, I believe I won't perform too poorly. What? Corrosion from the source? The experience of the ancient sun god? Klein originally didn't wish to continue discussing the topic of the Miracle Invoker Beyonder characteristic and Sapphira Castle, but when he heard that, his heart stirred. He recalled Amon's description and couldn't help but ask. The source refers to the oldest one, the first creator? He desperately wanted to know what sort of unbearable fate Sapphira Castle would bring him. Amon pinched the edge of his monocle and looked at him for a few seconds before suddenly smiling. It's better if I don't answer this question directly, as you won't believe every word I say. Tell me, I'll determine its authenticity. Klein suppressed the urge to blurt out and calmly replied, maybe it's just because you haven't made up the reason yet. Amon didn't mind at all as he smiled and said, you can think of it that way too. Haha. At times, the truth that you discover for yourself is definitely more agreeable than what others tell you. If you have the time, you can wander around the forsaken land of the gods. This should provide you with more clues. Of course, if you have the guts to enter Chernobyl, then you would know more. Klein didn't pursue the matter any further. After staring at the collapsed cathedral that was bathed in a faint yellow light, he casually said, did the dark demonic wolf hurriedly migrate because of the discovery of your existence? Amon nodded slightly and said, it wasn't just me. He also sensed the hanged man's gaze. He has been hiding in the forsaken land of the gods for thousands of years. He is very sensitive to such matters. A sequence 2 angel, perhaps even a sequence 1 angel, can only play hide and seek in the forsaken land of the gods and live such an abject life. Isn't the environment here a little too harsh? Klein sighed inwardly before saying, you must have left more than one avatar in the City of Silver. Why didn't you try to stop me from reviving there? Why didn't you send more powerful avatars over? Amon nudged the bottom of his monocle with his right index finger and laughed. If that happens, you'll choose to revive in the outside world. This will cause quite a bit of trouble for my follow-up tracking. And if we were to relax a little due to the existence of the Miracle Invoker Beyonder characteristic in the forsaken land of the gods, you would most likely be resurrected here. In the following game, the only things that we need to consider are the Hanged Man and Ouroboros. Just as I thought, Klein said after some thought. Even in the same region, as long as you exceed a certain distance, your true body and avatars have no way to instantly merge or switch locations. Back when you first entered the forsaken land of the gods, you were able to transform back into your true form because the anomalies with Sapphira Castle had similarly interfered with the area here, allowing your true body to sense something. You went to the entrance in advance to wait? After hearing what he said with a smile, Amon asked without answering, what's your guess? Why don't you guess if I've turned back into my original form? Klein raised his right fist and covered his mouth. After pondering for a few seconds, he revealed a smile. I guess your other avatars are setting up a corresponding ritual to allow your true body to descend directly. Before he could finish his sentence, his figure rapidly turned incorporeal and dissipated. The historical void projection was dispelled. In the wilderness outside the ancient city of Nois, the air around the hiding Klein suddenly stirred. In midair, there were a series of illusory monocles. They stared at Klein's figure, as if saying that they had finally found him. However, Klein's figure rapidly faded away. Back when Amon moved the monocle to his right eye, Klein had already returned from ancient history to the real world. With the help of Paper Angel, he had used Flaming Jump and other Beyonder powers to quickly leave. The reason why his historical projection was able to speak to Amon rather normally was because he was essentially a marionette. It was Kona's Kilgore in the form of Gehrman's sparrow. He had a worm of spirit that came from history inside him, and was controlled by Klein's projection outside the city. Meanwhile, in the process of escaping far away, Klein frequently entered the historical void, allowing the projection outside the city to intermittently regain consciousness and maintain control of his marionette. This caused the person who had spoken to Amon to fall into deep thought from time to time. He would either stare with a focused look for a few seconds, or seemingly need time to recall what Amon had said. Against the god of deceit, Klein didn't dare to be careless. After leaving Nois City, he circled around 2 more times and used his true vision to inspect his surroundings above the gray fog. Only then did he slow down. The corrosion that comes from the source. I wonder if Amon is bluffing me. Indeed, I'll have to enter Chernobyl one day to take a look, but I have to become a miracle invoker. Doing so after I have self-preservation abilities to a certain degree. Otherwise, I'll just be knocking on death's door. With the lantern that Danitz had sacrificed, Klein casually proceeded in the dark environment of the weeds. Thanks to this experience, he finally had a deeper understanding of the danger in the forsaken land of the gods. Extremely harsh and warped environment, crazy cultists, fallen angel, groups of almonds wandering about, and mythical creatures lurking in the darkness. Somewhere here, there are evil gods watching everything. I can stir remnant divine powers that others can as well. As expected of the forsaken land of the gods, the danger level far exceeds my imagination. As he sighed, he turned his attention back to the dark demonic wolf. To be frank, he didn't think he had any advantage in tracking this mythical creature. Be it his understanding of the forsaken land of the gods, or his confidence in the target situation, he was far inferior to Amon, who had been exploring the area for more than 1,000 years, as well as the true creator's blessed who had the benefit of this place being their home ground. My only advantage is that I share the same seer pathway as the dark demonic wolf. Furthermore, I have Sapphira Castle. There is a strong inclination for beyonder characteristic convergence. This will have a certain effect on fate and judgment. However, Amon is a king of angels of a neighboring pathway. There is also the law of beyonder characteristic convergence between him and the dark demonic wolf. The effects won't be any weaker than mine. Klein considered carefully for a moment when he suddenly had an idea. He found his best advantage. The advantage was, he was very weak. Compared to Amon, the true creator's attendant, and the dark demonic wolf, he was very weak. Under normal circumstances, this was a disadvantage, but at times, it was possible that it could bring him something that he wanted. My level is low, and I'm weak. That means that I can become the hunting target of the dark demonic wolf instead. It's very difficult for me to find him. So why don't I get him to come and find me instead? A scholar of your might not necessarily interest the dark demonic wolf, but if this scholar of your can still trigger Sapphira Castle, that's a whole other matter. I can stir Sapphira Castle from time to time, leaving behind traces of the gray fog's aura as bait for the dark demonic wolf. The more he thought, the more viable he believed it was. Of course, this was definitely very dangerous. If he wasn't careful, he might accidentally bait Amon, or even the true creator. And the dark demonic wolf might very likely choose to observe first before suddenly launching an attack, and not giving him a chance to prepare. Before taking this approach, I have to make sufficient preparations. There's no need to rush it. Taking a deep breath, Klein reached out his hand and pulled out the black demonic wolf sculpture's fragment that was red on the inside. Although he had failed to obtain the item due to Amon's obstruction, this didn't stop him from taking it out from the historical void. This was because he had already seen it and had touched it, and the item itself wasn't at a high level. At this moment, he wanted to use the fragment to search for the hiding spot of the dark demonic wolf, by analyzing it in reverse and figuring out its modus operandi. In the wilderness ruled by darkness, Klein lifted the lantern that emitted a faint yellow light. He got his bearings and changed directions before slowly entering Backlund Hillstonborough. Furs, who had gone out traveling once, finally received a reply from her teacher, Dorian Gray Abraham. Chapter 1184 Record. There are no worms of star at the moment. He wants me to take note of what else the person who's seeking to purchase a worm of star needs. Furs read the letter from her teacher, and silently heaved a sigh of relief. However, when she thought about how she was about to begin hunting the Saint of Secrets, she felt a pang of nervousness. After all, he was a demigod, a saint who had reached Sequence 4 about 1 or 2 years ago. It was unknown if he was already at Sequence 3 now. Although the mastermind behind the operation is Ma'am Hermit, as the bait, I still need to worry about my own safety. Besides, the Aurora Order still has Rose Redemption backing them, as well as angels and a King of Angels. Furs didn't regret agreeing to Gehrman Sparrow's request. This was something she had wanted to do in the first place. However, due to the high risk involved, it was inevitable for her to feel flustered and uneasy. This made her think of another possibility. If Mr. World could participate in the operation and lead it, I'll definitely feel less nervous and worried. It wasn't that Furs didn't believe in Ma'am Hermit's strength and experience, but that the results from the World Gehrman Sparrow were laid bare for all to see. His hunts didn't include 1 or 2 demigods, so having him run the operation would make one feel at ease. Zio, who was sitting beside the fireplace, glanced at her friend and asked, "Is the hunt about to begin?" "Yes." Furs nodded solemnly before saying, "It won't be too soon. Everyone needs some time to prepare." Hunting a demigod wasn't akin to fox hunting in the suburbs during autumn. Setting off wasn't as simple as bringing the equipment and gathering friends. This required a precise and meticulous plan. Furs believed that Ma'am Hermit had to come to Backlund personally, or live in another kill box that she had decided on for some time. Only by figuring out the exact situation could she come up with an effective plan. As for Miss Justice, she was still speeding up the digestion of her Dreamwalker potion. This might take another 1 to 2 months or even longer. For Furs, she could afford to wait. She also wanted to finish digesting her scribe potion, set up the ritual, and become a traveler before the actual operation began. The only thing she wasn't sure of was whether the world would rush them. "I will try my best to convince him." "No, let Miss Justice convince him. That's what a spectator is best at." Just as Furs mumbled, she saw Zio turn around and hesitantly say, "The liaison officer from MI9 suggested that I should officially join them today. And they said that, with the new king in place, there are many matters from the past that I don't need to worry about. People like me and him have the chance to have importance placed on them again." Furs listened attentively and said after some deliberation, "That isn't some sort of investigation that's targeted at us, right? This will likely make them discover that there's a faction behind you." Zio nodded and said, "They believe that I was abandoned after that incident. Also, they suspect that that faction belongs to a church, the Church of Evernight." Zio believed in the Evernight goddess, so mentioning the church was undoubtedly referring to the Church of Evernight. However, considering that her good friend was a believer in the god of steam and machinery, she made an emphasis to prevent any ambiguity. "Heh, that's what Mr. World told us to disguise ourselves as." Furs stroked her hair with a relaxed expression and said with a smile. She then made herself look serious and mature. "Zio, this is an opportunity for you. Acting as a judge clearly requires the support of the officials. Your current strength and level aren't enough to be a judge in the underground world in Backlund. You also lack sufficient support. If you can really enter a court of law, rotate between the different courts, and serve in a criminal court for a few months, your potion should be completely digested. Oh right, I heard that MI9 has a paranormal court, within it, one which specializes in beyonder cases. If you become a judge there, you might be able to attempt to be a disciplinary paladin by February or March next year." Seeing Zio clearly being moved by her speech, Furs hurriedly added, "Once you make enough contributions, you might be able to restore your father's reputation to a certain extent. Anyway, George III is already dead. As long as it doesn't affect his reputation, Jevington too might not stop it." Jevington was the eldest son of George III. He had worn the crown as Balam's emperor, and was now the new king of Lone. Zio fell silent for a while before she slowly nodded. "I'll give it a try." "Yes, after things settle down, you can bring your mother and brother to Backlund. Although the situation is tense now and food prices are rapidly rising, you definitely get food rations from MI9. You can provide for them." The more Furs spoke, the more she felt that joining MI9 was a good thing. After persuading Zio, Furs entered her bedroom and prayed to Mr. Fool, asking him to forward her message to Mr. World. Immediately following that, Furs extracted the important points of her teacher's reply and described her thoughts, hoping that Gairman Sparrow could be more patient. Just as she finished her prayers and was about to leave the room, her vision suddenly blurred. She saw a crimson tide surge out of the void, instantly drowning her. Furs immediately discovered that she had arrived in the ancient palace and was sitting on her usual high-back chair. However, there was no towering figure that was shrouded in gray fog at the long, bronze table's seat of honor. At that moment, there was only her and the world Gairman Sparrow around the long mottled table. Furs's mind suddenly tensed up as her thoughts raced suddenly. Mr. World, I meant just now that it's best if you have some patience. This will make things simpler. It's actually fine if you don't. We will begin hunting as soon as possible. Klein let out a soft chuckle. Don't worry, I'm not in a hurry. When his ultimate goal had become an angel-level potion formula and grade 0 sealed artifacts, he had enough patience regarding this matter. Phew. Furs secretly heaved a sigh of relief and asked curiously, "Then why did you look for me?" Klein replied calmly, "Didn't you wish to digest the scribe potion as quickly as possible? Apart from the customs of different places, I think you still need to record all kinds of beyonder powers. The higher the corresponding level, the better the digestion's effect." Furs's eyes lit up when she heard that. Yes. After blurting it out, she found her attitude highly questionable. She hurriedly and fearfully added, "Is this the advance payment you mentioned before?" Klein nodded slightly and said, "Let's begin. Be prepared. I've borrowed a grade 1 sealed artifact from Mr. Fool. It corresponds to the level of a saint. To a sequence 6 scribe, the chances of successfully recording an angel-level beyonder power was extremely low, nearly impossible. Therefore, Klein didn't attempt to summon Miss Messenger and Mr. Azek from the historical void to showcase their skills. Furs sat up straight and nodded heavily. Yes. In the next second, she saw the world Gairman Sparrow raise a white-bone scepter covered in blue gems. Amidst the bright light, bolts of lightning leaped out of the void and interwove together, forming a forest of lightning that emitted an aura of destruction. Furs's eyes turned silvery white as her body and mind were left in awe. After the lightning storm calmed down, she was stunned for 2 seconds before timidly saying, "It failed." "Again," Klein calmly replied. Lightning storm descended again and again in the ancient palace above the gray fog. After an unknown period of time, Furs exhaled and leaned back in her chair. She couldn't hide her joy as she said, "It's a success. It's a success." She had finally recorded lightning storm once. It's finally over. Furs immediately relaxed. Then she heard the world say without emotion, "All right, next beyonder power." Next, Furs saw the crazy adventurer at the bottom of the long, mottled table extend his right hand and grab at the grayish-white fog. Out of nowhere, he took out a long, thorny cross that was covered in bronze. Record this cross's ability? Furs tried hard to make her expression appear normal. After she digested the scribe potion to a certain extent, the godhood powers that she could record had increased from 1 to 2. No. Klein glanced at Miss Magician and said, "Record my summoning of the unshadowed crucifix." "It failed," Furs said softly. The reason for her failure this time was that she didn't have time to record it. Dispelling the maintenance of unshadowed crucifix, Klein once again reached into the fog of history and pulled out an iron-black revolver. "It didn't succeed," Furs replied with a complicated expression. All she wanted to do now was to return to the real world and digest what she had just received, but the ringing of the bell to mark the end of class just didn't happen. Nearly 30 times later, when Furs's head throbbed in pain and her mental strength was beginning to run dry, she finally recorded historical void summoning once. At that moment, she felt her tears fill her eyes, but she still held back her fatigue and tried her best to show the attitude of a good student. This can summon people and objects that one is related to through the historical void. When the time comes, who should I summon, or what item should I summon? Klein looked at Miss Magician and coldly replied, "Me." Furs forced a smile and asked, "From which period?" "The last time we met." Klein had already thought of an answer. It was the him who had deliberately sent Miss Magician back from the world of ice and snow to Backlund before he destroyed George III's ritual. He had already become a scholar of your by then. Furs nodded solemnly and subconsciously asked, "What if I fail? For me to summon someone who exceeds my own level, the probability of failure should be very high. Come again tomorrow to record this ability. Use Lamano's travels," Klein said calmly. "Will 2 times be enough to succeed?" Furs instinctively had such a question. However, she didn't dare to speak when she saw how certain the world Gehrman Sparrow was about it. She raised her hand and gestured. "Then can I go back now?" With a terse answer, he allowed Miss Magician to leave Sapphira Castle with a delighted expression. In a primitive forest on Sonia Island, Alger Wilson led his subordinates into an elven ruin that was seldom visited. Chapter 1185 Reappearing. The withered vines drooped down, covering the rotting wooden structure. The entire ruins had been frozen in a silent atmosphere that no one had tread within for a while. Alger and a few sailors circled around the ruin in the environment of a withering winter, but they still failed to discover anything of value. "Captain, batches of adventurers have come here before. What else could they have left us?" Finally, a sailor in his 30s impatiently broke the silence. This resonated with his other companions as they echoed, "A place that didn't take us much time to learn about can definitely be easily found by others." That's right, that's right. Let's continue to fuck the Phasacians." "Captain, are you trying to make this place a stronghold?" Alger slowly scanned the area, quelling the sailors to stop their complaints under his gaze, and making them choose to obey. After a few seconds of silence, he said, "I plan on using this place to ambush the Phasacians. Let's observe the terrain and see if it's suitable." With such an excuse, the sailors barely perked up, and the group quickly entered the depths of the elven ruins. As he walked, Alger's spiritual perception was triggered as he subconsciously looked behind a gigantic tree. There were some signs of churning in the soil over there, and it wouldn't take more than a year. Alger retracted his gaze and pretended not to notice anything amiss. He naturally looked elsewhere. After exploring the elven ruins, they returned to their new camp. At that moment, it was almost evening and the forest was getting colder. Alger had dinner with the sailors before leaving 2 patrolling guards behind, and then all of them entered their respective tents. The cold wind blew through the trees, causing the bonfire to sway. Alger, who had wanted to leave the campsite in the middle of the night, suddenly heard faint singing from afar. The voice was ethereal, like a woman humming and singing slowly, relating her inner thoughts. This made Alger involuntarily recall the past. He recalled his mother who had long passed away, and the days when he was a bullied child. Indescribable grief surged from the bottom of his heart, preventing him from waking up immediately. He waited for a few seconds before he suddenly sat up, frowning and listening. This time he didn't hear anything. That melodious voice seemed to have never happened. Alger narrowed his eyes, grabbed his thick jacket, and put it on. He walked out of the tent and came to the bonfire. The 2 sailors in charge of night duty had just finished their patrol and were drawing warmth from it. "Did you discover anything unusual?" Alger asked in a deep voice. The 2 strong, vigorous sailors shook their heads. No. Alger's brows relaxed a little as he turned around, intending to make his own rounds. At this moment, he noticed something from the corner of his eye. The 2 sailors were too close. If it were any ordinary pirate, this wouldn't have been a problem. However, Alger's subordinates had undergone formal training through the Church of the Lord of Storms. They definitely knew that, in such an environment, the patrol team had to maintain a certain distance from each other. They couldn't be too far or too close. They had to be able to see their companions, as well as prevent themselves from being taken away at the same time from a single assault. Alger took 2 steps without batting an eyelid. He turned back and casually asked, "Did you discover anything normal?" He had changed the question, and made it appear very strange. The 2 strong sailors shook their heads and replied without changing their expressions. "No. No." Alger nodded slightly with a relaxed expression. "Very good." He turned around and slowly walked into his tent. The moment the sailors' attention on him was cut off, Alger drew out the blade of poison and the gargoyle glasses. He opened his mouth and prepared to belt out a song. At that moment, the ethereal voice from before appeared once again. It echoed in Alger's ears and pierced into his mind. This was an extremely ancient folk song, spelling out an extreme sense of sadness and melancholy through the singing. It made Alger's spirit body produce pale, non-existent arms that constantly tore at him. Alger's expression twisted as his skin began to produce slippery, black fish scales. His dark blue hair stood up one by one as they became abnormally thick. The thoughts that originally existed in his mind were disrupted by the song, and were cut off by the pain. They were unable to take form any further. Alger fell and struggled on the ground. He squirmed, becoming less and less like a human as he was pushed to the brink of losing control. Suddenly the singing stopped. A slightly indifferent voice entered Alger's ears. Some elven blood. Then, that shall be all. Use Ciatas's beyonder characteristic well. Alger's forehead was covered in cold sweat as he slowly got up. He didn't know when a figure had appeared in the tent. It was a woman with black hair and exquisite facial features. Her ears were slightly pointy, and her eyes were deep. Her facial features were soft, and she wore a complicated and ancient long dress. Even though she didn't have the advantage in height, she still gave off an air of superiority. Are you the elf queen, Queen of Calamity Kohainum? A thought flashed through Alger's mind as he took the initiative to ask. The woman played with a beautifully decorated golden cup and calmly said, "Haven't you already met me?" Alger suddenly recalled the similar singing he had heard on Pasu Island. He recalled seeing a high elf when he entered the underwater coral palace. After a few seconds of silence, Alger said in a deep voice, "You're actually still alive." At the same time, he silently recited Mr. Fool's honorific name in his heart, but he didn't know if it would be effective if he didn't recite it out loud. The black-haired woman's expression remained unchanged as she replied, "It's very difficult for an angel to perish without encountering an enemy." Then why did you split the characteristics and place yourself to be in a strange state? This makes you need to wait for an opportunity to be resurrected. Alger had learned of the corresponding situation at the Tarot Club, and now, he was asking out of curiosity, partly to stall for time. The elven lady suspected to be Queen of Calamity Kohainum snorted. "Because the divine throne for Storm is occupied by Leotaro, and I have no way of resisting the tyrant. Also, the elves are dwindling in numbers. My anchors are becoming increasingly unstable." Other people might not know who Leotaro was, but Alger knew very well. He didn't dare continue this topic in the real world. Just as he was about to ask the Queen of Calamity Kohainum's goal for coming, the elf queen said, "Do you want to become a demigod?" "She wants to use my body to revive. She wants to use my wish to advance to sequence 4 and obtain godhood as bait to intrude my body?" While Alger was tempted, questions arose in his mind. Considering how Mr. Fool could cleanse all kinds of corruption, Alger acutely felt that this was an opportunity. This made him recall a term Emperor Roselle had once mentioned, a Trojan horse. And now he had a high chance of bringing in the Trojan horse and throwing out the invaders within. "What do you want me to do?" Alger didn't appear too anxious as he raised a question based on his personality. Queen of Calamity Kohainum observed him for a few seconds before saying, "When you have the right to make contact with the Book of Calamity, take out something that no one else will notice, and take it to the Western Continent." The Western Continent, the legendary homeland of the elves? Alger frowned slightly and said, "Hasn't the Western Continent already disappeared?" The corners of Kohainum's lips curled up slightly. "Since it disappeared, it will reappear again. It will definitely appear again when the apocalypse happens." Without waiting for Alger to ask further, the elf queen paused and said, "You don't have to personally send that item to the Western Continent, but you have to entrust someone trustworthy. Although I'm not skilled at curses, I can still make you die in pain from breaking our agreement." But what if the Western Continent doesn't appear again, or if it can't be entered? Alger thought seriously for a moment. Kohainum, with her gentle gaze and lustrous raven-black hair, seemed to be lost in beautiful memories. After a few seconds, she calmly said, "If it really doesn't appear again, then the agreement shall be null and void. Perhaps entering the Western Continent requires an incantation or command, but I do not know what it is. However, you can ask a particular existence. Who? Alger asked, puzzled. Kohanim glanced at him and coldly said, The Mr. Fool you were chanting in your heart just now. I have a feeling that he is the key to this matter. Alger's heart tightened as he hurriedly lowered his head in response. I understand. Seeing this, Queen of Calamity Kohanim nodded slightly and said, If you wish to become a demigod and abide by this agreement, you can head to the elven ruins when the sun rises. After the voice fell, the elf queen's figure quickly dissipated, like a mirage that was often seen at sea and in the desert. Alger suddenly opened his eyes and realized that he was lying in a tent, having just woken up. His memories were in a mess, but he quickly regulated them. He and his sailors had just found the location of an elven ruin, and had yet to explore it. The previous exploration, singing, sailor anomalies, and appearance and conversation with Calamity were all just a dream. It's no wonder I was so careless. Even though I knew that I might encounter the Queen of Calamity, I didn't pray to Mr. Fool first. The Queen of Calamity relied on her status as an angel to create this realistic dream? Or perhaps, she has a corresponding sealed artifact. Even if she exists in a special state, she still has the means to use her powers? Alger listened to the commotion outside the tent, and he realized that everything was normal. He then sat down and prayed sincerely to Mr. Fool. In just 20 to 30 seconds, Alger arrived above the gray fog, and saw Mr. Fool sitting at the end of the long, mottled table. You met Kohanim? After the hanged man greeted him, the fool Klein spoke casually. Alger answered seriously, Yes, but I can't be sure that it's the elf queen. Chapter 1186 Opportunity and Danger are two sides of the same coin. The fool acknowledged softly, and didn't deny the hanged man's guess, nor was he certain that it was Queen of Calamity Kohanim. After all, it was impossible for him to take out a gold coin in front of him and perform a divination on the spot. Alger waited for a few seconds. Seeing no clear response from Mr. Fool, he quickly went into greater detail about what he had said in the prayer. From the woman suspected to be Queen of Calamity Kohanim, saying that he had some elven blood in him, to how she gave him a promise of becoming a demigod, as well as the key to the Western continent and the completion of the agreement. After recounting everything, Alger shut his mouth and lowered his head, not daring to directly ask Mr. Fool what he thought. He obediently waited for the great existence to speak. Some elven blood. Send something from the Book of Calamity to the Western continent. The missing Western continent might reappear again. The Western continent. The fool Klein listened quietly. He closed his eyes and calmly said, This is very dangerous, but this is also an opportunity for you. He had already gained initial control of Sapphira Castle, and the power he could mobilize had reached the level of a Sequence 2 angel. As for Queen of Calamity Kohanim, she couldn't be higher than this level. Therefore, he was quite confident that he could resist the various accidents brought about by the Elf Queen. It was precisely because of this that he dared to claim it to be an opportunity for the hanged man. Of course, the prerequisite for grasping the opportunity was that the hanged man wasn't rash or went overboard. He had to constantly remember to ask for protection at all times. Therefore, Klein specially emphasized that it was very dangerous. He wanted the hanged man to remember to pray to Mr. Fool before he took action. This short sentence had two meanings to it, but he believed that Mr. Hanged Man would definitely understand it. Alger was delighted as he replied rather sincerely, as though he had learned from the sun, My faith lies only with Mr. Fool. These words made Klein feel uneasy as he remembered the pain of being drowned by endless lightning. He could only smile without saying a word. Alger deliberated for a moment before asking, Honorable Mr. Fool, what are the incantations or commands needed to enter the Western continent? I would like to know that too. The fool Klein sighed and said, It's not time for you to know. Yes, Mr. Fool. Alger didn't ask further as he bowed respectfully. When he returned to the real world, he immediately walked out of the tent and led his sailors out. Under the light of the morning sun, he spent a certain amount of time reaching the elven ruin. The scene here was identical to what he had seen in his dream. The withered vines covered the decaying wooden structure, and there were some areas where the text on monuments could be seen. The air seemed to have frozen, as though no one had stepped in for a long time. Looking around, Alger suddenly thought of a question. How was he to face the church after he really relied on the Queen of Calamity to become a demigod? Directly rebel, becoming the 5th king over the 5 seas. No, the 6th king? But this way, I won't have a chance to come into contact with the Book of Calamity. Unless I design a situation that forces the church to use this sealed artifact that might have been labeled as grade 0 without my knowledge. That will not only be very difficult, but I have to become a sea king, or even a calamity to succeed. Yes, I can request the world's help. If I wish to continue staying in the church, I have to give them a reason that they cannot ignore, but is sufficiently believable. Alger frowned slightly without hiding his solemnity. In the eyes of the sailors who followed him, this was a sign that he was worried about the ruin. As his thoughts churned, Alger gradually came up with ideas. There are many books in the church that have records of people turning into demigods due to a fortuitous encounter. 2/3 of them were invaded by evil gods and devils, and eventually lost their lives in the purification process. However, 1/3 of them passed the test and became a high-ranking deacon or a cardinal. Now that the war has broken out, the situation in Lone is tense. As long as there aren't any problems during the investigation, the church wouldn't mind having an additional sequence for demigod as cannon fodder. Then, I can slowly gain their trust later. The prerequisite for all of this is that the Queen of Calamity hasn't truly attempted to corrupt me or left a mark on me. Considering the various sealed artifacts in the church's possession, I have to pray for Mr. Fool's blessings ahead of time. According to Miss Justice, Angel's embrace can effectively hide one's true thoughts and tests in one's dream. With the members of the Tarot Club beginning to become demigods, or about to become demigods, Alger really didn't wish to be lining the bottom of the barrel. Just like in the past, he had done so many things in the church, all for the sake of being superior to others. Now he was naturally willing to take a certain risk. With this decision, Alger immediately led his sailors into the ruins, and began exploring the path in his dreams. This time he didn't split his subordinates into small teams. On the one hand, he was worried that an accident might occur, and on the other hand, he hoped that they could all be his witness. After 15 minutes, Alger and his crew arrived beside the giant tree that had signs of its soil being churned. Before he could survey his surroundings, his vision blurred, and he saw a gorgeous palace made up of coral. Above the palace was a layer of deep blue seawater that rippled outwards. Giant pillars stood tall and held up an exaggerated dome. It was tall and beautiful, but also dark and gloomy. Alger looked around and realized that all the sailors beside him had disappeared. He immediately knew that he might have been pulled into an illusion. He took a silent breath and slowly walked into the coral palace. There were many elves inside. They were either roasting fish or placing spices in the coagulated animal blood. Their choice of utensil was 2 tree branches to bring the food to their mouths. None of them minded the entrance of a stranger. Alger then cast his gaze to the 9 stairs 100 meters away. On the steps, there was a coral throne inlaid with sapphires, emerald, and lustrous pearls. The elf queen, Queen of Calamity, was sitting there, looking down at Alger. Very good. Kohainam nodded and threw out the exquisite gold wine glass. The gentle but resilient wind held the wine cup in its embrace and, like tiny pixies in a line, carried the corresponding items towards Alger. Alger reached out to receive it and looked down. He discovered that there was a blue liquid inside the golden cup. It was incorporeal, dreamy, and surreal. Drink it, and then head to the waters near the Simim island of the Rorstad archipelago. Find this coral palace. The thing you want is inside. If I don't drink this wine, I won't be able to see that palace? Alger asked thoughtfully. Although he was facing an angel, he was still able to communicate rather calmly. This was because he met a mighty figure every week, and was already used to this situation. Queen of Calamity Kohainam nodded and said, "That's right. Will you leave a mark on me?" Alger asked cautiously. "Yes," Kohainam said coldly. "So, before entering the Coral Palace and obtaining the corresponding items, you can't return to Pasu Island. You can't meet the angels under Liataro. The pontiff can't be met even if I want to. Alger heaved a sigh of relief inwardly before asking. After I get hold of that item, the effect of this wine will disappear? Elf Queen Kohainam replied without any change in expression. No, you need to directly consume that characteristic. When the time comes, this wine will transform into a seal, allowing that characteristic to temporarily not invade your body. How you prepare the ritual and explain this to the Church of Storms will be up to you. Let the characteristic belong to me first before holding the ritual? This way, there might be a better way for the church to accept it. Alger thought for a moment before raising his hand to bring the wine cup to his lips. The ice-cold liquid slid down his throat and disappeared in a blink of an eye. The entire coral palace shattered as the light of dawn and the remnants of the gigantic green tree reappeared in front of Alger. You didn't sign a contract or get me to swear an oath. Yes, drinking that cup of wine is equivalent to making an agreement. Alger retracted his gaze and said to the surrounding sailors who were unaware, There's nothing here. Let's go deeper and take a look. In the ancient palace above the fog, Klein also retracted his gaze from the crimson star representing the hanged man and nodded thoughtfully. That's Ciata's and Mobit's grave. I never expected that golden wine cup to have such an effect. That is indeed Elf Queen Kohainam. How's her present condition? Half of it is in the Book of Calamity, while the other is hiding somewhere unknown. She was using the golden wine cup or the characteristic to influence reality. Mr. Hanged Man hasn't been contaminated for the time being. I'll wait for him to head to the Rorstad archipelago before making another assessment. As his true body had a limited amount of time left in the historical void, Klein didn't stay any longer, and he returned to the pitch-black wilderness. He carried the lantern that emitted a faint yellow light as he walked towards a certain location. As he walked, he turned his head to look east, which was symbolic of where Chernobyl was. His footsteps slowed down involuntarily. Once I gather sufficient information from the dark demonic wolf's former hiding spots, I'll head east. I'll walk all the way until I reach the boundary and confirm the situation. Then, I'll consider the matter of the miracle invoker beyonder characteristic. Amon probably wouldn't expect that I would suddenly leave. He definitely knows the past of the dark demonic wolf. It's impossible for him to do the same kinds of investigations that I'll be doing. Yes, but he will definitely be tracking me. Klein exhaled slowly and sped up his pace. A bolt of lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the dark and red desolate plains. Raindrops began dripping down intermittently. Klein dragged out a black umbrella from the historical void. With one hand holding an umbrella, and the other holding the lantern, he proceeded alone. About a week later, the future was docked somewhere along the long lone coastline. Katlia held a stack of tarot cards in her hand and said to the sailors, Nina and company, I'll be staying in Lone for some time. All of you have to watch Frank and prevent him from doing his strange experiments. Chapter 1187. Change. Upon hearing the captain's instructions, Nina pouted and pointed out the window. Are any of Frank's experiments not strange? Katlia was momentarily at a loss for words. All she could do was sigh and say, If there are any signs of danger, write to me immediately. As a mysticologist, she also had her own messenger. All right. Nina puffed her chest out and said, If there's anything to blame, it's solely because I'm the most mature and reliable person on the future. Having said that, she asked curiously, Captain, what are you doing in Lone? What mission did you take on? Are you going to engage in some sabotage raids behind enemy lines? Nina was of Phaeacian descent, and she was considered half-Intis. She naturally had some inclinations in the recent war. Therefore, she guessed that her captain had established contact with Intis's intelligence department. You could say that, Katlia replied sternly. In a sense, Nina's guess wasn't wrong. She had indeed taken on a mission, and was dealing damage in Lone's capital, Backlund. However, her target wasn't an official faction but a cultist. Furthermore, there's still a chance to meet the Queen. She probably hasn't left Backlund yet, and the earliest she'll leave is probably after the new year. Upon thinking of this, Katlia suddenly felt a little excited. Ever since she left the Dawn, she hadn't really met Queen Mystic. She only had letters to communicate with her, or despite being on the same boat, They didn't communicate with one another for some reason. Nina didn't dare to press further as she pointed to the door and said, "Captain, is there anything else? If not, we'll leave." Katlia nodded, indicating that this future bosun could leave with her subordinates. Just as Nina held the handle and gently twisted it, Katlia suddenly recalled something and hurriedly shouted, "Nina!" Nina, whose blonde hair was tied into a high ponytail, turned around with a confused expression. "Don't drink," Katlia emphasized seriously. "When I return to the ship, you'll be allowed to have your fill." Nina immediately revealed a charming smile. "Deal." Katlia thought for a moment before exhorting. "Apart from Frank, you have to take note of Heath's condition. Don't let him generate curiosity towards unknown voices, and don't let him be overly exhausted. Also, pull Adolov out of his room frequently, and control the frequency and times he interacts with mysticism knowledge. Also, I know. Don't I know them all too well?" Nina waved her hand and agreed. After the bosun and her subordinates left the captain's cabin and closed the door behind them, Katlia cast her gaze out the window to look at the currently invisible backland. After a few minutes, she took out a tarot card from the deck in her hand. It depicted a lonely old man with a glass lantern and a staff, the hermit card. Late at night, Backland, Empress Borough, Earl Hall's house. Audrey, who was wearing a white silk nightgown, suddenly opened her eyes. She took a blue cloak and draped it over her body. She then got out of bed and walked to the full-body mirror in the room. Through the crimson moonlight shining through the curtains, she carefully observed herself. Her pair of emerald green eyes seemed to glow brightly and limpid. It was so clear that one could clearly see every detail. Audrey closed her eyes. By the time she opened them again, all the abnormalities had vanished. The corners of her mouth curled up bit by bit, and a small depression appeared on her face. Her eyes curved slightly as she silently praised herself. "Audrey, you've finally come this far." She had completely digested the Dreamwalker potion. According to her confidence in herself and her predictions, she had originally believed that it would take until February for her to digest the potion. To her surprise, she had encountered many strange and completely different dreams recently. This included many dreams within dreams, dreams that were a result of a mental illness, lucid dreams, dreams caused by the influence of evil spirits and wraiths, and the dreams of a few demigods. Under normal circumstances, as a dreamwalker, Audrey could generally determine the creature's level when entering a dream, thus avoiding danger. However, those demigods had hidden themselves very well. Only when she entered their dreams did she realize that something was amiss, and nearly jumped in fright. Fortunately, she wasn't discovered all those times. She ended up accumulating experience, and she began carefully touring, traveling, observing, and analyzing in the demigod's dreams, allowing her to greatly digest her potion. In addition, the other special dreams gave her a completely different experience. After that, she attempted creating multiple dreams within dreams. Some attempted to hide behind the scenes in her dreams and guide them in an ingenious manner to develop and interfere with the subconscious in a reverse manner. She treated the mental illness of the owners of the dreams, or the corruption caused by an evil spirit or wraith. To a certain extent, she had gone against the requirements of only observing, recording, and not making any interference. Yet, this strangely accelerated the digestion of the potion. This made her conclude a new principle. If you really want to interfere, then be the mastermind and conductor behind the scenes. It's so that even if the goal succeeds, no one will notice it. This was something that Audrey had done very well. The few people with serious mental illnesses had unknowingly recovered after having 5 or 6 strange dreams. And it was very normal for a dream to appear strange and incomprehensible. To be able to digest the Dreamwalker potion so quickly, it's mainly a result of my good luck recently. Without so many unique experiences, I'd definitely have to wait another month or 2. Yes, I might even be caught by a demigod and be thrown into a beyonder prison or directly be killed. When did my luck become so good? It seems like it started after I sacrificed the ice cream to that Fate Domain's angel. His blessed. Audrey looked at her reflection and blinked her eyes with a smile. She quickly retracted her gaze, scanned her bedroom, and walked to the dressing table. Sitting on it was a deck of cards. In a room of a girl who enjoyed mysticism, it was normal for her to have a deck of tarot cards. Audrey stretched out her right hand and touched the card at the top with her fingertip. She slowly took a deep breath and muttered to herself, "The fighting at the Amantha Mountain Range is getting more intense." Mid-Seashire had already lost a port. It said that the defenses of the Hornacis Mountain Range in Civilouse County can't last until spring. If not for the fact that we have gained a significant advantage at sea, our connection with the southern continent's East Balam would have surely been severed. Alfred is still there. I wonder how this war will develop. Thankfully, I'm about to become a demigod. Mr. World has already given me the manipulator's potion formula and main ingredient. The 7 drops of tears that were shed from intense human emotions have also been found during my dream experience recently. The tree mentor's golden leaves were obtained via a trade with Little Sunday. I'm just short of the blood of an elderly mind dragon. Phew, I'll try to trade for it with the psychology alchemists. Before Vin Rambus died, I was already the person in charge of a small psychological discussion group. But will this reveal that Vin Rambis's death has something to do with me? Or could I get Mr. World to summon the blood of an elderly mind dragon from history? This can last for at least 15 minutes. When I succeed in advancing, I'll converge my spirituality and complete my queuing. Its disappearance will not affect anything. After all, it's just a supplementary material. Audrey, you actually learned how to fake things. What's more, it's on such matters. After a self-deprecating comment, Audrey began to think about the kind of situation to use to complete the advancement ritual of a manipulator. The ritual required one to drink the potion while in the midst of an emotional resonance generated during a special occasion with at least 10,000 people. As her thoughts raced, Audrey came up with a preliminary idea. The goddess's Winter Gifts Day? But no matter how large a mass is, it can't accommodate 10,000 people. The cathedral can't accommodate so many people. Yes, it's usually impossible. If there's a chance, I can donate a sum of money. I can suggest we do an extremely large mass in Memorial Square, so as to placate the souls that passed away during the war. In the most important square, the family members, relatives, and friends of the deceased are invited. As long as they accommodate a certain proportion of the participants, the emotions that resonate will affect the others who are participating in mass, allowing the ritual's requirements to be satisfied. After calmly analyzing the situation, Audrey suddenly bowed her head and looked at the mirror on the dressing table. She saw that the faint smile on her beautiful face had long disappeared, leaving behind only calmness and sadness in her eyes. She stared at herself, her lips curling up slightly as she whispered, "Audrey, you've become despicable." Closing her eyes and opening them again, Audrey had returned to normal. She reached out to the stack of tarot cards on the dressing table and flipped the card at the top. The card depicted a goddess of justice sitting on a stone chair with a sword in one hand and a balance in the other, coldly watching everything. Backlund, Hilstonborough, in a house with a fireplace. "You finished digesting your scribe potion?" Zio had just changed into her home clothes when she heard the piece of unbelievable news upon walking back to the living room. Furs nodded with a haggard expression. "Yes. Do you know what kind of life I've been enduring recently?" As she was being forced to travel to 6 places in a consecutive manner, she had to experience, admire, and record the sights day and night. In addition, she would be pulled up above the gray fog, recording all kinds of strange or high-level beyonder powers. The lightning storm and the historical void summoning powers had been replaced several times. They had finally recovered their original setup today. "I don't know," Zio answered honestly. "I know you don't know." Furs took a deep breath and said, "What about you? How have you been recently?" "Not too bad. It was arranged for me to preside over a paranormal court, and I had some thoughts about the acting principles. The speed at which the potion is being digested has increased," Zio acknowledged. "I find it hard to imagine you wearing a judge's robe and sitting at the tribunal's seat to judge." Furs sighed from the bottom of her heart. "Are you trying to say that the prisoners and lawyers won't be able to see me?" Zio added, not minding it at all. Furs laughed dryly and said, "I'll need to have some rest to prepare my advancement ritual to become a traveler." "Don't you need to go deep into the spirit world? Do you have a way?" Zio asked in puzzlement. Furs nodded and said, "That person asked me to summon his messenger." Chapter 1188 Thick-Skinned Summon His Messenger. As judgment of the Tarot Club. As a member of MI9, Zio understood what a messenger meant. Furthermore, she knew that the middle ranks of the numinous episcopate widely used messengers. Before she could ask for more details, she saw Furs walk towards the guest room on the first floor with her eyes vacant and footsteps listless. She said with an ethereal voice, "Let me sleep for a while. We can talk later." She slept all the way till the next morning, waking up thanks to the aroma of meat. "Desi pie?" Furs rubbed her eyes and walked out of the room. She saw that the table was already filled with food. "Yes." Zio came out of the bathroom. The one from the corner of the street. "It's not bad." Furs enthusiastically acknowledged and sat beside the dining table. She quickly picked up the desi pie and stuffed it into her mouth. After finishing one, she drank a mouthful of sweet iced tea and sighed in satisfaction. "This is life. Oh no, I forgot to brush my teeth." After she was done washing up, she finally regained her ability to think. She looked at Zio in puzzlement and said, "Did MI9 not have any suspicions about how you secretly became a judge?" "They thought it was the remuneration that motivated me back then." Zio informed her of what she had learned. Furs stroked her hair and said with a smile, "That's true. Let them ask the Church of Evernight." She covered her mouth and yawned. "I'm going to summon that messenger." After this period of recording, the way she addressed Klein had changed from Gairman Sparrow and Mr. World to that person. On the one hand, it was a form of respect, and on the other hand, she was afraid that someone would eavesdrop. Upon hearing her friend's words, Zio looked around and asked in confusion, "Aren't you going to set up the ritual?" She remembered that summoning a messenger required a ritual. "That's only one of the methods. That person got me to use another method." Furs glanced at her clothes and realized that her clothes were all wrinkled since she hadn't had the time to change her clothes last night. Upon realizing that she would be meeting the messenger later, she decided to pay attention to her image. She hurriedly returned to the bedroom on the second floor and changed into a beige dress with frilly designs. After preparing herself, she raised her right hand in front of Zio, and she grabbed at it as if she wanted to pull something out of the air. In her eyes, an illusory book took form. It quickly flipped and stopped at one of the pages. In the next second, her arms sank and a figure emerged from the void. This was Gairman Sparrow, who was wearing a half-top hat and a black coat. He had a cold expression and an unyielding air, but his eyes appeared somewhat dull. "I succeeded. This is just my second attempt. I've only tried it once yesterday and failed." Furs's eyes widened as though they wanted to take in more light, so as to see more clearly. She knew that this was the historical void projection she had summoned, so she wasn't too nervous. Instead, she held her breath and looked warily at Gairman Sparrow's projection. She couldn't tell if he was real or fake. She still remembered the combat achievements of this crazy adventurer. Furs has actually summoned Gairman Sparrow? Shouldn't it be his messenger? Would Gairman Sparrow still be able to summon something? Questions popped up in Zio's mind. Just as Furs was unsure of what to do next, Gairman Sparrow's eyes darted around slightly as his gaze instantly turned focused. He no longer had a rigid and vacant look, as though he was alive. Following that, he took out an exquisite silvery harmonica and blew it. No sound came out of it, but the surroundings instantly turned cold as a biting wind stirred. Then, a woman dressed in a dark and complicated long dress with fur blonde hair and red eyes in her hands walked out of the void. Her 8 eyes looked at Gairman Sparrow. Gairman Sparrow nodded slightly and pointed at Furs. "This lady needs to set up 4 special coordinates deep in the spirit world. Please help her." "All right," one of the heads of Rionette Tinker said as it moved up and down. Gairman Sparrow didn't speak further. As he approached the window, he made the glove on his left hand become transparent. His figure quickly disappeared as he teleported out of the house. He left. He left just like that. The historical void projection I summoned left just like that? Furs stared with her mouth slightly open, as though she was experiencing a comical play. According to her understanding, the thing she summoned should be under her control. How could it leave after giving some instructions? Could it be that the historical void projection has the same personality as the actual person? No, it's as if Gehrman Sparrow himself had descended. Furs glanced at Zio and realized that she was just as confused as she was. At that moment, Furs suddenly shivered, as though an extremely terrifying creature was glaring at her. She subconsciously turned her head, and realized that Gehrman Sparrow's messenger was looking at her with 8 red eyes, carefully observing her. As terrifying as Gehrman Sparrow, Furs forced a smile and said, "Sorry to trouble you." At this moment, Rionette Tinker's 4 blonde, red-eyed heads spoke one after another. "Need to pay 800 gold coins. There's still a fee?" Furs turned agape once again, at a loss for a response. After a few seconds, her thoughts suddenly became active as she began to calculate her savings. After loaning £2,400 to Zio, I still have £780 left. My expenses recently have been quite high, but the royalties from my past novels are still being credited. Adding my other income and the £300 Zio returned me, I have a total of £1,258. That's enough. Furs immediately agreed, but she immediately discovered a problem. Gold coins, all of them? Rionette Tinker's forehead shook slightly. Yes, you can. Oh, as expected, all of them need to be gold coins. I remember that Mr. World has been trying to gather gold coins and exchange for gold coins for quite some time before. It was to pay this messenger? The relationship between him and his messenger is really complicated. Mr. World should still have quite a few gold coins. I'll try to exchange 800 gold coins from him later. Furs secretly heaved a sigh of relief and said, "All right." After agreeing, Furs saw the headless messenger raise one of the heads in her hand to bite down on her clothes near her shoulder. The surrounding colors became saturated and brighter. The reds became redder, the blacks became blacker, and the whites became whiter. In such a manner, Furs was led by Rionette Tinker through similar scenes that she had no way of getting her bearings right. It didn't take long before she arrived at the spot where there was a faint fog. In the depths of the fog, one eye after another seemed to look over, but they quickly shrank back. When Furs summoned Gehrman Sparrow's projection from the historical void to Backlund, he had immediately entered the fog of history and dashed all the way to a period before the first epoch. His consciousness came alive within the projection, reducing Furs's spirituality expenditure. This way, Klein had indirectly returned to Backlund. This was also the reason why he had gotten Miss Magician to use such a complicated method to summon the messenger. As for the messenger summoned by the adventurer's harmonica, it was an independent existence. It didn't increase the burden on Furs's spirituality burden. Even if the historical void projection vanished, Rionette Tinker could still remain in the real world if she so wished. After a teleportation, Klein's figure appeared in a secluded alley near St. Samuel Cathedral. He then used his faceless powers to change his appearance and figure. During this process, although there were still a few pedestrians in the alley, they were affected by an illusion. They didn't notice a sudden companion appearing beside them. Right on the heels of that, Klein straightened his clothes, pressed down on his hat, and walked quickly to St. Samuel Cathedral. He found a seat to the side of the main prayer hall and sat down. After taking off his hat and chanting an honorific name, he sincerely drew a crimson moon on his chest. Then he clasped his hands together, closed his eyes, and prayed softly to the Evernight goddess. I'm currently searching for traces of the dark demonic wolf's past to grasp his exact condition. At this point, he recalled that the dark demonic wolf might have been a former colleague of the Evernight goddess. They likely knew plenty about each other, as he quickly added, "I wonder if you can give me some hints." He didn't wait for a response. Instead, he maintained a calm attitude and continued, "After this matter is completed, I plan on heading all the way east to see if I can reach the Western continent and see what state that place is in. I'll take this opportunity to escape Amon's pursuit and find other possibilities." After praying, he tapped his chest 4 times in a clockwise fashion and whispered, "Praise the Lady." Just as he finished speaking, a dark night sky with countless stars suddenly appeared in front of him. A message unknowingly appeared in his mind. It was information regarding Black Demonic Wolf, Kotur. Klein was stunned for a moment. Only when the starry sky before him completely disappeared did he return to his senses. He sincerely praised the goddess once again. After leaving St. Samuel Cathedral, he used creeping hunger and another teleportation to arrive near the Holy Wind Cathedral located in Sherwood Borough. He wanted to pray to the Lord of Storms. He looked up at the towering steeple and felt some momentary hesitation. He really wasn't sure if he should enter the headquarters of the Church of the Lord of Storms in Backland. I'm just a historical void projection. There's nothing to be afraid about. I won't suffer any losses from praying, but what if the Lord of Storms hears about the Amon situation and decides to bestow 0 to 32 to me? That way, I won't have to risk hunting the dark demonic wolf. A person should always be hopeful. After some thought, he finally made up his mind. He carefully raised his hand and summoned Inuni, the one who had yet to be parasitized by Amon, from the historical void to walk into the Holy Wind Cathedral in his own form. A minute or two later, a dark cloud suddenly appeared above Backland. There seemed to be a flash of silver lightning in the Holy Wind Cathedral, but no one noticed it. Chapter 1189 Winter Gifts Day. As soon as the dark clouds in the sky dispersed, everything in the Holy Wind Cathedral returned to normal. In a nearby corner, Klein raised his hand to rub his forehead. The corners of his mouth twitched as he mumbled, "If you don't want to give it to me, so be it. But why did you kill my marionette?" He then took a deep breath before his figure rapidly faded away and disappeared. The time limit for maintaining the historical void projection was almost over. After all, a scribe's imitation of a high-level power had significant differences from the original version. The burden of a Sequence 6 summoning a Sequence 3 was rather heavy. Even if a scholar of your could transfer his consciousness over and reduce the spirituality expenditure, it was impossible for Furs to keep it up for too long. In the outskirts of Backland, downstream of the Tussock River, Leonard hid his red gloves and slowly walked towards a certain spot. Suddenly, the slightly aged voice of Palaz Zoroast rang out in his mind. "How's your former colleague been doing recently?" Thinking back to the conversation at the Tarot Club, Leonard suppressed his voice and said, "He just avoided a trap set up by Amon's avatar. He's searching for the truth in the forsaken land of the gods." After listening to what he had to say, Palaz Zoroast didn't say another word, and allowed Leonard to proceed forward. After setting up the special coordinates, Furs was thrown back into the real world by Gehrman Sparrow's messenger. "I feel exhausted, but I just woke up not too long ago. It must be that high sequence beyonder powers are too draining on my spirituality." Furs covered her mouth and yawned. She looked at Zio with a haggard expression. "That's possible." Zio agreed with her friend's judgment. Her intuition told her that the Gehrman Sparrow projection that had been summoned definitely wasn't simple. It could even be equivalent to a saint. After some hesitation, Zio said, "Sleep a little longer. Don't attempt to advance in such a state. In one of my previous trials, the murderer was mentally psychotic. He would deliberately make his friends, his students, and the tramps he took in, consume potions in all sorts of negative states, watch them lose control, and mutate into all kinds of monsters, disgusting and terrifying ones." What was this fellow's goal? Furs was stunned for a second. 2 goals. One was to observe whether the same potion caused the same loss of control on different people. The other was to use oil paintings to record the corresponding scenes. He believed that the madness, the pain, and the distortion had an unparalleled beauty, one that can stimulate his greatest creative passion. Zio recalled the trial from back then. She felt a sense of hatred and lingering fear. He was a complete lunatic. That fellow should be executed. Furs couldn't help but shudder when she imagined it. She bared her teeth and said, "Was he a cultist?" Perhaps, but there were no clues. On the surface, he appeared to be an outstanding artist, and he is very famous internationally. If it wasn't for more than 5 of his students and friends who had disappeared over the past few years, attracting our attention, then he might have had to wait until he completely went mad and lost control, becoming a monster, before this matter would be discovered. Zio suddenly paused for a moment before saying, "Back then, everyone in the law enforcement team that opened his hidden basement vomited. There were all kinds of mutated and terrifying corpses, and hanging overhead were all kinds of harrowing yet charming oil paintings. A hateful fellow, but it's also a very attractive story. Furs thought for a moment and pressed. Was he a devil? No, he's a psychiatrist. Zio rejected her friend's guess. You sentenced him to death? Furs asked in anticipation. Zio shook her head. His defense lawyer convinced me that he's more suited to be a sealed artifact researcher. There's a lawyer? You have lawyers at the paranormal court? Isn't it all a direct trial? Furs asked in surprise. Zio straightened her blonde hair and said, there are some beyonders from the lawyer pathway among us who also need to act. Of course, they don't know that they're acting. All right. Furs yawned again and pointed to the reclining chair beside the fireplace. I'll sleep for a while. Don't you have work? We can take days off, Zio replied succinctly. Furs didn't ask further as she walked to the fireplace and collapsed into it. About 2 to 3 hours later, she woke up and cogitated for 15 minutes. Following that, she found the Traveler Beyonder characteristic and the supplementary ingredients given to her by her teacher, Dorian Gray Abraham, and concocted a potion bottle. The potion's color was white but transparent. It was like half-melted snow water, occasionally producing light green bubbles. Furs held the potion and glanced at her friend who was on guard by the side. She smiled and said, if I lose control, don't hesitate. Just chop off my head. No, pray first. There might still be a chance to save me. Zio slowly nodded. Maintain this state. Furs silently exhaled. Without any hesitation, she raised the bottle and gulped it down. In the blink of an eye, she felt her body and her eyes light up one after another. They blasted around her body and opened one illusory door after another. Furs's consciousness couldn't help but enter one of them. Her entire body turned transparent as she vanished. In such a chaotic state of mind, Furs nearly couldn't regain her sense of self-awareness. Thankfully, she had her fair share of being tormented recently and had a strong will. Furthermore, from time to time, she could feel the 4 special coordinates in the spirit world. Finally, she slowly came to her senses. After an unknown period of time, she realized that she had already entered the depths of the spirit world. It was difficult to tell her exact location, and she couldn't find her way back. With the help of the 4 special coordinates, Furs slowly traversed back to a familiar spot, leaving the saturated, stacked colors and the thin fog before walking out of the spirit world. The 4 special coordinates weren't only used to help me find a way back, they can also effectively maintain my self-awareness. Teacher is only a sequence 7, so without any actual experience, it's inevitable for him to miss out on such knowledge. As Furs thought, she cast her gaze towards Zio and smiled slightly. I'm a traveler. Zio heaved a sigh of relief and asked curiously, what new Beyonder powers did you get? The main one is teleportation. Also, invisible hand. In addition, the number of demigod-level Beyonder powers I can record has increased to 4. The actual effects should be close to that of a sequence 4. Furs examined herself. She then raised her hand and pulled out a tarot card from across the room, one used for divination. It was a person with a scepter in his right hand that pointed towards the sky. His left hand pointed to the earth. In front of him were people like the Holy Grail, a scepter, a sword, star coins, the magician card. Every year's longest night was the birthday of the Evernight goddess, commonly known as the Winter Gifts Day. On this day, all Evernight believers would head to a nearby cathedral to witness the sunset of the sun. When night fell, they would participate in Mass, enjoy a holy meal, listen to the hymns, and do all sorts of activities. The year 1350 for Lone's Evernight believers was a very heavy year. The intensity of the war and the cost of items had made them lose the good mood they had. However, on Winter Gifts Day, they still came out of their houses. This was because the Church of Evernight was going to hold a massive mass in the various large public squares to placate the souls that had passed away. At the same time, many foundations would distribute food vouchers at the Massachusetts. People who received them could be able to obtain the corresponding items in any of the relief points or cathedrals. This led to Storm and Steam believers who didn't celebrate Winter Gifts Day to head for the nearest square, Westboro Memorial Square, where George III was blasted to death. Dressed in a black cloak while walking her golden retriever, Susie, with a leather bag on her back, Audrey walked among the nobles looking refined. Her expression didn't seem abnormal, but she hid some pain and guilt. She had obtained the blood of an elderly mind dragon. After concocting the manipulator potion, she placed it in the small bag Susie was carrying. Susie was already a Sequence 6 hypnotist. She believed that not many people present would notice her abnormality and snatch things from her. The blood of the elderly mind dragon came from the hermit Catlia. Apparently, she had obtained it from Queen Mystic, and she had paid £3,000 for it. This was in line with her expectations, as she didn't really want to obtain the ingredients from the psychology alchemists. After all, her direct superior, Vin Rambus, had only died a few months ago. To collect the items needed for an advancement, it made it inevitable for people to suspect her. As for the other members of the psychology alchemists, they had the ability and intelligence to notice this point. Besides, after becoming a demigod, one has to come into contact with the psychology alchemists' counselors. According to Mr. World, there might be an angel from the mind domain hidden amongst them. I'll continue making preparations. With a suitable opportunity and excuse, I'll consider raising my position in the organization. I'll hide my strength for now. The blonde Audrey lifted the ends of her skirt slightly and slowly walked towards her predetermined spot. Along the way, many nobles extended their hands to her in a friendly manner, hoping to help this beautiful, noble, and weak young lady through the crowd. However, these were all blocked by Earl Hall. He got his eldest son, Hibbert, to be in charge of his youngest daughter while he held his wife's arm and walked ahead. From time to time, he would turn back to look at the most dazzling jewel of Backlund. Not long after their family arrived at their destination, the Church of Evernights Bishop of the Backlund Diocese, St. Anthony Stevens, walked up to the high platform in his black robe with red patterns. He looked around, raised his right hand, and tapped his chest 4 times in a clockwise fashion. Praise the Lady! When the believers below responded, this saint's deep voice could be heard by everyone. Today is the celebration of the night, but the goddess's response is pity. She takes pity on every mother who has lost her child. She takes pity on every lonely child. And she takes pity on everyone who has suffered immense pain. She said that all of this will end. All the suffering will return to silence and repose. Chapter 1190 Resonance. As Anthony Stephen Vincent's words echoed in Memorial Square, it spread to other areas. The Loanese citizens who participated in the Mass were both moved and sad, feeling warmth in the midst of their depression. In a different square, different choirs began to chant the hymns. The ethereal and holy voice seemed to echo deep in everyone's heart. Full-faced above the land stood the crimson moon. And sweet it was to dream of themselves, of child and wife and parents, but ever more one. Unknowingly, everyone felt their spirits being cleansed and their spirituality naturally released. They seemed to have entered a dream and were strolling in a quiet darkness. Their children were sleeping here. Their parents, their wives, their husbands, their friends, and the deceased were no longer suffering. They no longer had any pain. Their expressions were peaceful and gentle. We look upward into the night sky. We tenderly say her name, Evernight Goddess. If she heard us, she would surely agree, smiling with purity at the dead. Come rest and sleep well, my children too. The people who were strolling in the dream felt awash with intense sorrow once again, as though they realized that they were really going to bid each other farewell. They recalled all the beautiful memories from the past. They recalled the scene of their family enjoying delicacies and having fun at the dining table. They recalled the people who looked at them warmly, and the pain of seeing them get hurt. When they learned of their passing, it was as if they could tear their souls apart. They recalled the dark clouds and separation that had been brought to this war. They were sleeping peacefully in this serene nation, no longer having any worries. However, the people who survived had to suffer the days and nights, turning haggard and withered. One teardrop after another flowed down. The people participating in Mass at Memorial Square could no longer suppress their emotions, as they silently released the pain they had accumulated. A huge wave of sadness filled the air, mixed with the chanting of the choir, as though it had a corporeal form. Cross your hands humbly over your breast. Make the silent prayer and shout from the bottom of your heart. The only escape is tranquility. 3. The people who were sobbing silently with their eyes closed subconsciously followed the content of the hymns and made similar gestures. Then they shouted in their hearts, infected with each other's emotions. The only escape is tranquility. The grief reached an apex with more than 10,000 hearts resonating at Memorial Square. At this moment, Audrey opened her eyes and bent down. She took out a bottle of potion from the leather pouch that her golden retriever, Susie, was carrying. There were countless points of light floating in the potion, just like the manifestation of the sea of collective subconscious. Audrey didn't hesitate. Under such circumstances, she removed the bottle cap and gulped down the liquid inside. Unlike in the past where she could experience the potion slush through her throat and into her stomach, she immediately felt abnormal. She felt that she could no longer sense her body. Her entire being seemed to have condensed into an idea as she merged into the illusory sea around her. This was her first time directly seeing the sea of collective subconscious without passing through a dream or mind island. As though she had returned to her mother's embrace before she was born. She returned to the very beginning where the imprints left by human ancestors were washed away by the tides as they crumbled and were influenced. There was fear, madness, and all kinds of terrifying mental corruption. For a moment, Audrey found it difficult to resist. Her consciousness faded, and her body shook as though it was on the brink of melting away. However, the sea nearby wasn't serene. There was a certain degree of undulations, spreading the intense sorrow and pain around. Under such influence, the self-aware Audrey, who was about to be assimilated by the sea of collective subconscious, also began to resonate, generating uncontrollable feelings of grief within her. The grief spread from one thought to another. Soon, it filled the blob of thoughts that Audrey had mutated into. It pierced through her soul body and pierced her soul. Audrey finally regained a little of her senses. She skillfully placated herself, constantly giving cues to remove the corruption until she regained her senses. The voice in her ears became clearer and clearer, louder and louder. Finally, it reverberated through the sea of collective subconscious. The only escape is tranquility. The only escape is tranquility. The only escape is tranquility. Audrey repeated the prayer as her figure quickly turned clear. With a mere thought, she split herself into many transparent and illusory bodies. She traveled through the sea of collective subconscious and reached the mind islands that represented different people and stepped onto them. In these places, she could clearly see the sadness coming from different people, the bombshells that came from the sky, the airship that made up a fleet, the letters spelling bad news sent from the front lines, blood and flesh splattering in front of them, and the person who they loved suddenly collapsing in front of them. The pile of toys that no longer had an owner, the fit of coughs that came from the great smog. The only escape is tranquility. The golden retriever, Susie, also shut her eyes in Massachusetts. She used the human language to recite those words in her heart, but she failed to notice any changes in her surroundings. Suddenly in her soul, in her body of heart and mind, Audrey's voice sounded. Susie, I succeeded. I've always been worried that I'll become more and more indifferent as my sequence increases due to the potion's effects. That I'll become more and more like a mythical creature instead of a human. Susie raised her head in confusion, and saw that although the blonde girl's eyes were tightly shut, tears had unknowingly covered her face. Then she heard Audrey say in her heart, thankfully, I can still feel their sorrow. How nice. In Susie's eyes, teardrops fell from the corner of the blonde girl's eyes. It was crystal clear. At this moment, the sun's final ray of light was swallowed. The night brought about tranquility. Everyone opened their eyes and said in a calm voice, the only escape is tranquility. After crying without restraint, the bright, cheerful Audrey's mood became heavy. She became a little sensitive and a little sad. It made everyone who saw her feel a sense of love from the bottom of their hearts. Under all kinds of protection, she returned to Empress Borough and returned to her room. Only then did she have the chance to seriously examine herself and digest the knowledge and experience she gained from the sea of collective subconscious. Others might not be able to tell, but Audrey knew very well that the tall, blonde, blue-eyed beauty in the mirror already possessed extraordinary strength and exaggerated dragon-scale defenses. She could break through a block of steel with one punch. Oh, I can still use dragon transformation. It's equivalent to using an incomplete mythical creature form. However, I have to wait until I get used to the potion and keep stacking up the correct psychological cues. Otherwise, I can lose control. Every dragon transformation can't exceed a certain amount of time. Otherwise, even if I have the means to treat my mind and soul, I'll be contaminated by madness and confusion, causing me to lose control. My current limit is about a minute. The core power of a manipulator is manipulation. I can allow a body of heart and mind pass through the sea of collective subconscious and enter another person's mind island. I can directly change their subconscious and read their thoughts, silently driving them to do all sorts of things. Matching manipulation is virtual persona. I can create many personas, allowing them to have a corresponding body of heart and mind. This aspect can resist a lot of influence in the mind domain. And on the other hand, it can allow me to use them to silently invade the target's island of consciousness without any signs of it. I currently can have only 13 virtual personas. A manipulator can also create a terrifying mental plague. By using the sea of collective subconscious, I can spread all kinds of mental illnesses and extreme madness. Yes, awe has turned into mind deprivation, a huge area of effect version. It's no longer just the single effect of awe. I can also transform my designated thoughts into a mind storm that will sweep the surroundings, affecting all my enemies. Hehe, as a manipulator, it naturally comes with the ability to travel the sea of collective subconscious. It's called consciousness stroll. Otherwise, my target would have long left by the time I arrived at a location after a series of complicated manipulations. Audrey looked at herself in the mirror and suddenly revealed a faint smile. Then, she puffed up her cheeks and opened her mouth as if she was about to spew something. Since her mythical creature form was a mind dragon, it definitely had to have some form of dragon's breath. This was an attack that could directly stimulate and harm the target's body of heart and mind and soul body. It dealt damage in an area of effect manner, an upgraded version of psychic piercing. Following that, Audrey's green eyes turned slightly and she looked away. She sighed inwardly. This is what it means to be a demigod. These powers make even me feel afraid. How powerful is Mr. World for him to be able to kill Vin Rambus? In the ancient palace above the fog, as the participants of the hunting operation made their preparations, they decided to organize a private gathering to discuss the details. A manipulator is that terrifying? The magician Furs looked at Miss Justice beside her and blurted out in shock. Just now, Audrey had briefly mentioned the changes she had undergone after becoming a demigod. Although she didn't elaborate in detail to protect her trump cards, it still left the magician, the hermit, judgment, and the star in shock. Actually, it's not that terrifying. Mr. World knows very well. Audrey cast her gaze to the bottom of the long, mottled table. The World Gehrman Sparrow didn't nod as he tersely acknowledged. I also had powerful helpers before I could kill Vin Rambus. He paused and said, before discussing the hunting operation, I would like to know how to make the Abraham family sense my friendliness. 1. Adapted from The Lotus Eaters by Tennyson. 2. Adapted from The Cry of the Children by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. 3. Adapted from The Bridge of Sighs by Thomas Hood and Lotus Eaters by Tennyson. Chapter 1191 Grasping One's Mentality Friendliness? Upon hearing the World Gehrman Sparrow's question, Furs nearly doubted her ears. The image of Mr. X's head that was put together, leaving it covered in cracks, crevices, and blood surfaced in her mind. Just as Furs was deliberating over her words, Audrey glanced at her and smiled at the World Gehrman Sparrow. To let the Abraham family sense your friendliness, it isn't about what you do, but what Miss Magician writes in her letters. That's right. Unless I appear directly in front of Miss Magician's teacher, his understanding of me will only be limited to the various rumors and things that Miss Magician tells him. As long as the story she tells is good enough. Even if it doesn't fit the actual situation, it doesn't matter. Klein suddenly realized that he had been splitting hairs on the question. Furs was somewhat enlightened by Miss Justice's words, but she didn't fully understand it. After looking at the hermit, the star, and company, Justice Audrey said to Furs, "You need to convey Mr. World's friendliness to your teacher. For this, you can fabricate some stories and not tell him the truth." "Then what should I say?" Furs asked for advice. This wasn't because she wasn't good at making up stories. On the contrary, this was what she was most adept at. However, the problem was that writing a novel that was well received was different from a story that could convince people. If she could get a senior psychologist's advice on the latter, it would undoubtedly be easier. Audrey had already thought of the details of the letter before she opened her mouth. She replied unhurriedly, "It's obvious that your teacher has already noticed that you've rapidly advanced, and because of Mr. X's death and all sorts of sensitive issues, he has a certain level of doubt and vigilance regarding the Beyonder circles that you've participated in." "Yes." Furs nodded indiscernibly in agreement with Miss Audrey's judgment. If her teacher, Dorian Gray Abraham, was careless, he wouldn't have been able to survive to this day. He would have long been caught by the Aurora Order, or died in the hands of other powers who were interested in the Abraham family. Audrey continued, "In such a situation, he will still maintain contact with you. He will teach you knowledge, give you formulas, and provide you with ingredients. This shows that, on the one hand, he acknowledges your character and morals, and on the other hand, he will also have a certain level of anticipation for you to obtain important information from the mysterious and dangerous Beyonder Circle, as well as you becoming a sequence for demigod. This is the mentality we want to exploit." Audrey originally wanted to use the more neutral term, grasp, instead of exploit, but after pausing for a moment, she chose to face herself directly and face the essence of the matter. With Furs listening attentively in judgment, the star, and the hermit looking forward to what she had left to say, Audrey pursed her lips and said, "When you return, you can write to him and tell him that you have already become a traveler. It will make him happy for your growth, and also be surprised by such an exaggerated advancement speed. Then you can answer the question he asked previously, saying that the gentleman who was seeking to purchase the Worm of Star had mentioned something, that the ancient curse in the Abraham family seems to come from a secret existence known as Mr. Door. This is a question that your teacher has never told you about, but is definitely concerned about. Without a doubt, he will feel fear towards the gentleman who seems to know that you're related to the Abraham family. He will want to avoid you, but he will definitely yearn to know more. He will then try to find out what secret lies behind the curse that has plagued generations of Abrahams, one that he has no solution to. At the same time, a letter exchange isn't a direct meeting. It will give him a certain sense of security. He might change his residence, change his identity, and use a more roundabout way to receive the letter, but there is a high chance that he will not sever the connection. Maintain this connection. Step by step, reveal something more valuable. You will awaken your teacher's desire, and use it to portray an image of Mr. World, so that your teacher can experience some form of friendliness." At this point, Audrey stopped and looked at the World Gehrman Sparrow once again. She could roughly tell that Mr. World's goodwill towards the Abraham family was because he had a request, but as for the specific request, she wasn't a clairvoyant, nor had she read Gehrman Sparrow's mind. Naturally, she couldn't guess it, nor could she continue explaining. Klein nodded and said with a hoarse smile, "After we establish this kind of indirect connection, I might ask your teacher for a transaction, and use the promise of breaking the curse to exchange for certain items of value." Through demonistry, he had already grasped the solution to the Abraham family's curse. However, he didn't plan on exchanging it for the Planeswalker potion formula, or a Grade 0 sealed artifact. On the one hand, the difference in value was too great, making him feel guilty. On the other hand, he didn't want to bring a dangerous existence like Mr. Door back into the real world. It was being irresponsible to himself and the innocent. He was thinking of another way to make the curse of the Abraham family disappear to a certain extent. In other words, it might still exist, but it wouldn't affect the normal lives of the Abraham family, and provide a certain range of improvements. Is that so? Mid to high sequence Beyonders in the mind domain are really impressive. She can make people follow her arrangements without realizing it. Compared to when we first met, Miss Justice has seemed to undergo a complete metamorphosis. It makes people fear and respect her. Furs glanced at Zio and seemed to read the same poignant thoughts from her eyes. After some thought, she mustered her courage and said to the World Gehrman Sparrow, "What if my teacher rejects your request? Did you think I would murder for property?" Klein lampooned in Chinese. He scoffed and said, "Don't worry, I won't harm him. I won't use any methods that will force him." Phew. Although Mr. World is a little scary, he's still a man of his word. Furs slowly nodded and said, "I'll write a letter to my teacher according to Miss Justice's suggestion." Klein nodded slightly and surveyed the area. "You can begin discussing the hunt." Katlia took control and said, "The biggest problem with this operation is finding the Saint of Secrets Bodhi's." Furs immediately recalled how she had encountered him and raised her hand. "If I can borrow that powerful sealed artifact from my teacher, then I can bring it with me. I can often wander around Backland and use the convergence of Beyonder characteristics to attract Bodhis to a nearby location. This might attract other demigods of the apprentice pathway, or the leader of the secret order, Zeratul, or Blasphemer Amon." The more Furs spoke, the lower her voice became. She felt that this method was too dangerous. She didn't know what would happen to the other members who participated in the operation if Zeratul and Amon really appeared, but as bait, it was without a doubt that she would fail to escape. Katlia nodded and said thoughtfully, "If it's only a Grade 1 sealed artifact of the apprentice pathway, the law of convergence of Beyonder characteristics shouldn't be that attractive to neighboring pathways. The range will be limited to the demigods of the apprentice pathway. And from what I know, there aren't many of them. In fact, it can be said that there are very few of them. Most of them exist in the form of a characteristic or sealed artifact. I suddenly do not wish to become a sequence 4. Furs's eyelids twitched when she heard that. Katlia cast her gaze at the World Gehrman Sparrow. "Let's not discuss the problem of whether there are any Grade 1 sealed artifacts of the apprentice pathway. If we want to let the Saint of Secrets and Miss Magician bump into each other, the prerequisite is that he is also in Backland. He mustn't be that cautious and often goes out." Upon hearing this, Leonard said from the angle of a professional official Beyonder, "It's actually not difficult. As a demigod of the apprentice pathway, Bodhi's is definitely in charge of dealing with accidents among the upper echelons of the Aurora Order. He has sufficient mobility to aid the other members in different places." Haha, this is a term that appeared after the steam engine and the airship were invented. As long as you can create some matters against the Aurora Order in Backland, he has a high chance of showing up. As he spoke, Leonard glanced at Klein. Based on what he knew, in the chaotic battle outside Biome City caused by Gehrman Sparrow, the Saint of Secrets had appeared and picked up a glove. This is a solution. Audrey and company nodded. At this moment, the world suddenly said, "Let me remind you that the Aurora Order is an organization that worships a true god. Once you take action against them and secretly target their upper echelons, the true creator might be able to foresee this and give them a warning." "That can happen?" Audrey's eyes widened slightly as she observed Katlia, Leonard and company. She realized that they were equally astonished. This was something that they had never considered before. It wasn't that they weren't smart enough, but that they had never participated in such matters that involved high-level existences before. Or rather, even if they were involved, they weren't aware of it. "Then what should we do?" Furs couldn't help but ask. Klein replied in a suggestive tone, "By not targeting the Aurora Order directly, we can use a milder approach to fish out the Saint of Secrets Bodhis." Chapter 1192. Each serving their duty. A milder approach. The hermit Katlia, who lacked experience only on high-level matters, instantly had a new idea and probed. "Let Miss Magician participate in the various Beyonder gatherings in Backland, accidentally revealing that she's related to the Abraham family, attracting the attention of the Aurora Order." Seeing no objection from the World Gehrman Sparrow, Katlia thought as she looked to the other side. How we can make this matter appear reasonable without arousing suspicion. How to design the steps and procedures needed to expose herself, and how to lay the foundations at each one of the gatherings. These might require your help, Miss Justice. From her point of view, Only a manipulator who could accurately grasp the various mentalities of the different people at the gathering could allow the scheme to appear natural and reasonable, without leaving a trace. All right. Audrey nodded solemnly, feeling somewhat excited. She then added, although I've never done anything similar before, I will try my best to make everything seem reasonable. Why do I suddenly feel a little afraid? Why do I feel like we are all inexperienced people? Apart from Mr. World who can't directly participate. Ma'am Hermit might be very experienced in other aspects, but she shouldn't have been involved in such hunting before. This isn't a game, it's a cruel act that can kill someone if we aren't careful. Furs trembled when she heard this. She had a deep suspicion of the experience of most of the members. This included herself. However, when she thought of how Miss Justice and Ma'am Hermit were already Sequence 4 demigods, and that she and the Star were at Sequence 5, she felt that this wasn't too serious of a problem. After all, every powerhouse had accumulated their experiences over time from nothing. Furthermore, they still had the World Gehrman Sparrow, the strongest hunter over the 5 seas. Reasonable. Scheme. Manipulation. Listening to the conversation between Ma'am Hermit and Miss Justice, Klein subconsciously extracted the keywords. This reminded him of how he had used 0-08, and the experience of playing out situations that had been arranged by 0-08. He couldn't help but sigh inwardly. It's no wonder the Spectator's Sequence 1 is called author. This is indeed a very reasonable development, but it can change from a guidance to being forced. There's no need to rush yourself to make the arrangements in detail. Go back and think it over carefully. Yes, at the same time, we need to combine the feedback from the scene to make adjustments. Katlia nodded in thought as she immediately had a new idea. When Miss Magician participates in the Beyonder gatherings, it's best you hide in the vicinity. Use your control of the sea of collective subconscious to monitor every participant's thoughts and accurately grasp the feedback. Would 13 virtual personas be enough? There should be more than 13 members at a Beyonder gathering. I can switch to using monitoring to select a target to focus on. Audrey quickly analyzed the feasibility of the suggestion, and tersely acknowledged. That wouldn't be an issue. To her, this was also a form of training. At the same time, it was also a form of acting. She didn't directly use her Beyonder powers to affect the target, but instead used her precise understanding of the target's mental state to manipulate them by using words, behavior, actions, and a script. Seeing that there was no problem on Miss Justice's side, the hermit Katlia looked at the magician. In order to prevent a surprise attack and to better grasp your surroundings, I need to plant something on you. What is it? Furs asked warily. Katlia glanced at the world at the bottom end of the long, mottled table. After receiving the permission of Mr. Fool's Blessed, she raised her hand and pressed it between her brows. A pair of transparent eyes appeared in front of her, ones that were without eyelashes, looking cold and heartless. This is the eye of mystery prying. After becoming a mysticologist, I can place it on someone else's body. Whatever it sees, it will be what I see. Furthermore, once it enters a concealed state, it will be very difficult to be discovered through other means. Katlia gave a simple introduction. Upon seeing this scene, Klein leaned back slightly and sighed inwardly. When he first grasped spirit vision, he had seen something similar behind old Neil. If he had the mysticism knowledge he had now back then, he would have detected the problem earlier. Perhaps things would have developed differently. If this strange eye were to be planted on me, wouldn't I be watched by Ma'am Hermit when I go to the bathroom? Furs secretly drew a cold gasp as she hesitantly asked, can we plant it before each gathering? If we make frequent contact with each other, we'll be easily discovered. Besides, the Saint of Secrets wouldn't only appear at times you choose. Katlia nudged the heavy glasses on her nose bridge and explained, don't worry, I won't look at things I shouldn't see. It was a lesson learned through blood. Furs fell silent for a few seconds before she slowly exhaled. All right then, Katlia nodded slightly and continued. After discovering clues to the Abraham family, the Aurora Order will definitely do a certain amount of investigation. And for safety, so as to prevent any accidents from happening, they will definitely send out someone with a certain level of confidence. Among them, The Saint of Secrets Bodis is undoubtedly the person who is most interested in the matter regarding the Abraham family. In addition, Backlund isn't suitable for a King of Angels' main body to be active in, so the probability of him appearing is the highest. At this moment, the star Leonard, who was leaning against the back of his chair, raised his hand and said, "Not necessarily." According to the information we have gathered, the Aurora Order has other high-ranking members in Backlund, Saint Tenebris. After Mr. A disappeared, he came forward to organize certain matters. When the time comes, the person responsible for tracking the clues to the Abraham family might very well be him, not the Saint of Secrets. After all, this is his diocese. The demigod I met when I assassinated Mr. X was Saint Tenebris? Klein nodded in enlightenment without bringing any attention to himself. Katlia was already prepared for this. Without any hesitation, she said to the star, "This might require your help. In the near future, you should investigate more cases involving the Aurora Order and strike at them more. This way it will be inconvenient for them to move around. After discovering clues about the Abraham family, they might very likely seek reinforcements, getting, yes, the more mobile and more concealed Saint of Secrets to be responsible for it." Leonard thought of his recent mission list and nodded slightly. Sure. As the captain of a Red Gloves team, he had the right to do so. The only problem is, could this be predicted by the true creator? After Leonard agreed, he turned to look at Klein. After some thought, Klein pointed out indirectly, "You are similarly under the gaze of a deity." Leonard retracted his gaze as though he had gained some understanding. He said to the hermit Katlia, "I have no further questions." The hermit Katlia raised her glasses and cast her gaze towards judgment. "We will try our best to limit the Beyonder circles that Miss Magician will be involved in to East Borough and the Backlund Bridge area. These should be places you are familiar with. You have to constantly be aware of any abnormalities. Inform me immediately about the surroundings of the gathering's location." "All right." Although Zio was disappointed that she was involved in the periphery matters, she knew very well that with her strength, she could only do so much. At that moment, Katlia thought for a moment before saying, "You are a judge. When the time comes, you might need to do some area of effect prohibition. This might not be effective against the Saint of Secrets, Bodis, but it should be able to cause some interference. Don't doubt it. As support, mid-sequence Beyonders can similarly influence a saint to a certain extent. All of this is under the premise of a demigod resisting a demigod while all I provide is support. The education Zio had received since she was young, and the addition of the knowledge she learned from MI9 now put an emphasis on cooperation. It was very easy to understand what Ma'am Hermit was saying. At this point, the plan had just started taking form. The next step was to adjust it bit by bit through on-the-ground feedback. Furs heaved a sigh of relief when she suddenly thought of something. She hurriedly said, "Previously Mr. World mentioned that Bodis might have a Grade 0 sealed artifact. How should we deal with it?" Frankly speaking, she didn't have a direct impression of how terrifying a Grade 0 sealed artifact was. This was because she had never encountered one before, and had never seen anyone encounter it before. However, she had experienced the Grade 1 sealed artifacts that Gehrman Sparrow had borrowed from Mr. Fool. She knew how terrifying it was, and with a Grade 0 sealed artifact being one grade higher than a Grade 1 sealed artifact, it was obvious how potent one was. In the rumors that Furs had heard, some Grade 0 sealed artifacts could even destroy Backlund, or even the world. Katlia said after a few seconds of silence, "On the one hand, through Miss Justice's grasp of the minds of the people around you, she will be able to find traces of possible existences. On the other hand, with Miss Judgment's understanding of the various anomalies in the region, and combining it with divination, we will be able to determine ahead of time if there are any sealed artifacts. If we can't get any feedback from all of this, and if the Saint of Secrets has a Grade 0 sealed artifact with him, you don't have to be too afraid. He won't kill you immediately. He will definitely try to gain control of you and interrogate you at a safe place. We have enough time and opportunities to separate him from the sealed artifact. Remember, a sealed artifact that a Beyonder possesses isn't completely a part of his strength. During this process, didn't you record some high-level Beyonder powers? If the situation is critical, don't hold back, and try your best to escape. Sounds like you're not very confident either. Firz's face suddenly turned pale as she forced a smile. I'll try my best. At this moment, the world German Sparrow took the initiative to speak. In times of necessity, pray to Mr. Fool. I will also ask him to provide his protection in advance and provide some revelations. As this operation wouldn't pose a threat to Klein's actual body regardless of the development, and it might involve a Grade 0 sealed artifact, he could only gain some revelations from his initial control of Sapphira Castle. That's good. Furz, Zio, and company heaved a sigh of relief. When the private gathering was coming to an end, Klein glanced at Katlia and said, "It looks like there's no way to end the operation before New Year. I'll provide you with the advance payment." He then condensed some of mysticism knowledge he had never mentioned into a pale white brilliance, and pushed it to the hermit. Chapter 1193 Heading EAS Dark Angel Sasrar might very well be the negative personality that's expelled from the ancient sun god. Mr. Dor was once the most powerful king of angels. The Abraham family also possesses at least 2 Grade 0 sealed artifacts that's at the level of an angel of the apprentice pathway. The underlying rules of this world are chaos and madness. Pieces of mysticism knowledge resonated in Katlia's mind, causing her to feel weighed down in addition to her shock. If it wasn't for the Tarot Club, Mr. Fool's protection, and the world German Sparrow's help, she believed that it wouldn't be easy for her to obtain such knowledge. She definitely had to take a tremendous risk in exchange. If she wasn't careful, she would attract the attention of certain high-level existences, or be embroiled in madness and pain. Thank you for your advance payment. This will greatly help me digest the potion. Katlia opened her eyes and thanked him sincerely. According to her original plan, she believed that she would be able to gain some mysticism knowledge after meeting Queen Mystic. With German Sparrow's current advance payment, her mysticologist potion would most likely be completely digested. Unfortunately, a few days before she arrived in Backlund, Queen Mystic Bernadette had left the city to trace a lead. This left Katlia extremely disappointed. Upon hearing Ma'am Hermit's words, Klein, who was pretending to be the world, laughed hoarsely. A price is exacted for what's bestowed. As his voice echoed, he nodded at the 2 ladies, Justice and the Magician, indicating that he was also directing those words at them. After the private gathering ended, and the members left Sapphira Castle one by one, Klein stood up and walked back to the seat of honor from the bottom end of the long, mottled table, to the seat belonging to the Fool. He leaned back into his chair and propped his elbow on the armrest as the void beside him rippled and formed halos. These were prayer lights that came from puppets controlled by a historical projection that Klein had summoned. They had existed before the gathering, but the corresponding area had been hidden from the rest, so no one could sense it. It was only now restored to normal. He cast his gaze at the rippling light and expanded his vision into the distance. In the real world, a dark mountain stood erect. There was a mountain hole at the mountainside that extended downwards. This was once a place that hid many humans who had survived the cataclysm, but they were later turned into dark demonic wolf Kotar's marionettes. During this period of time, Klein kept tracing the clues and found 3 spots where the dark demonic wolf had hidden himself. However, Klein didn't gain much from them. The reason was simple. Just like now, there was a rock in the cave. On it sat a young man wearing a classic black robe, a pointed hat, a broad forehead, and a thin face, Amon. This angel of time seemed to sense the gaze from Sapphira Castle as he raised his head and adjusted his crystal monocle. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Klein retracted his gaze, his facial muscles twitching slightly as he muttered, "What a haunting presence. It's not like this fellow doesn't understand the dark demonic wolf's past. Is there a need for him to destroy all the clues I need? Furthermore, he only comes slightly earlier than me every single time. If it wasn't because he wasn't Amon's match, he really wanted to hang him up and beat him." Phew. Klein exhaled, and immediately returned to the real world. He wore a black top hat, and carried a dim yellow lantern. He dispelled his maintaining of the historical projection, and without looking back, He left the mountain and ventured deep into the silent wilderness. There was no hesitation in his footsteps, as he had already obtained detailed information about the dark demonic wolf, Kotur, from the Evernight goddess. He was well aware of the character, styles, and habits of the god of wishes. The reason why he was still searching for the dark demonic wolf's past was mainly because he wanted to verify the information. After all, the East Continent had been in the forsaken land of the gods for more than 2,000 years. The dark demonic wolf had escaped the Evernight goddess's attention for a sufficiently long period of time, so it was very likely that some abnormalities and changes in character would occur. If he made a plan following the intelligence provided by the Evernight goddess, there was a small chance that he would make the mistake of launching a surgical strike using an outdated map. Under the tremendous pressure from the true creator and Amon, the chances of the dark demonic wolf transforming isn't low. Perhaps it has even turned abnormal or half-mad, because of the excess stress. Klein couldn't help but lampoon inwardly. The words dark demonic wolf could actually be switched to Klein Moretti, or Zhoming ad verbatim. It just needed to be said in future tense. The other reason for his persistence in pursuing the dark demonic wolf's past was that he was trying to fool Amon, making it difficult for him to guess that he had already grasped the key information. Of course, this might not be able to deceive the god of deceit. His main goal was to obtain a victory of the mind, so as to adjust his mental state that was overly stressed. This allowed him to reduce the frequency at which he sought Miss Justice's treatment. Well, from the looks of it, the dark demonic wolf still maintains its clarity and rationality in the late second epoch. It wasn't as violent as when it first fused with other Beyonder characteristics, bloodthirsty, crazy. His most important personality appears to not have changed, ever so suspicious. He doesn't even trust his own marionettes. Once he decides to migrate, he would leave all the marionettes that he had before and sever all connections. Also, the dark demonic wolf seems to have migrated from the east over here. As he thought about it, Klein came to an abrupt stop. Under the darkness that was void of stars and the crimson moon, he cast his gaze in a particular direction by relying on his spiritual intuition. His expression gradually turned solemn as he raised his right hand and pressed on his silk top hat. Then he adjusted the direction he was heading in and walked towards where his eyes were trained at. That was the east. In the endless darkness, the lantern in his hand cast a lonely shadow. His trench coat was almost the same color as the distant night as his footsteps quickened. Backlund Empress Borough, inside the Hall family's luxurious mansion. Audrey sat in front of the dressing table and began to seriously consider how to release the bait in a seemingly reasonable fashion. During this process, she suddenly thought of something. That was that, if she wanted to go near a Beyonder gathering and monitor the thoughts of the participants, there was a lack of quick and efficient methods. As a sequence for demigod, she neither could fly nor teleport. She also couldn't use the flames to jump secretly. It would be fine if it was late at night, but if she wanted to use dreams as a springboard, she could only rely on her feet during the day and evening. Oh. Actually, my speed isn't slow, but if I were to run faster than a steam train, I would definitely attract attention. There are so many powerhouses in Backlund, so there's no lack of existences that can see through my psychological invisibility. Similarly, in my dragon form, I can fly, but that's just too eye-catching. Currently, I can only let my consciousness and spirit body enter the sea of collective subconscious, while I'm unable to bring my body in. As she pondered about the matter, Audrey could only consider purchasing sealed artifacts or mystical items that had traveling powers while deciding to travel through dreams if there were dreams. Otherwise, she could only rely on walking, carriages, or the metro. What a simple demigod. It's no wonder the full name is half human, half god. Those terrifying Beyonder powers are the godly side of things, while these are the human side of things. Audrey gave a self-deprecating laugh and reined in her thoughts. Backlund Hillston Borough. Sitting beside the fireplace, Furs opened a book that was propped on her thigh as a platform for her to write. Holding a pen in her hand, she stared at the horizontal lines on the paper and the tarot cards that were scattered on the ground for a long time. What's wrong? You don't want to lie to your teacher? No, everything you write will be the truth. You don't want to set up your teacher? Zaya walked over, crouched down, and looked up into Furz's eyes. Furz shook her head. No, it's not because of this. I do feel a little guilty, but I know that this is a good thing for the Abraham family. I'm just hesitating. I keep feeling that our destinies will change after writing this letter. Zaya was a little stunned when she heard that. She didn't quite understand what her good friend meant. Furz let out a sigh and said, the battles from the past and now were actually not that dangerous for us. We had the ability to avoid it and obtain the corresponding resources to continue our peaceful lives. Therefore, my feelings for them don't run deep. We're like people standing beside a torrent. We could have watched everything go by safely, but after writing this letter, we might perhaps be swept into the torrent. Zio listened quietly. She opened her mouth and pursed her lips. If not for this, do you think we can avoid the torrent of fate? As she spoke, she picked up a tarot card from the ground. The surface of the card depicted an angel blowing a trumpet and the deceased. Judgment card. Furz looked at the deck of tarot cards for a while before closing her eyes. She pulled her hair back and smiled. I understand. This is an inevitable destiny. After praying to Mr. Fool, and after obtaining the magician card, it was an unavoidable destiny. The fountain pen in Furz's hand finally landed on the letter. Pritz Harbor. Dorian Gray Abraham, who had long left the Fishermen's Association and changed his identity, tore open the letter sent by his student. As he quickly browsed through it, his expression went from shock, joy, and confusion to horror. Bang! Dorian threw away the letter in his hand and knocked down the table in front of him. It was like a monster hiding on that piece of paper with a curse. He retreated to another corner, pulled open the drawer, and took out some items. Then, he rushed to the door and prepared to leave. When his right hand touched the brass doorknob, Dorian's actions suddenly slowed down and finally stopped. He slowly turned around and cast his gaze at the letter on the ground. There was a complicated look in his eyes. After a few seconds, Dorian Gray Abraham slowly walked towards the letter. He walked with hesitation, feeling the dilemma and struggles, but he didn't stop. It was as if he had been seduced by the devil. Chapter 1194 A Lion's Hunt of a Rabbi/B Finally, Dorian stopped beside the letter. He bent down and reached out his right hand. His fingers trembled as he grabbed the edge of the paper and picked it up. This time, Dorian was very careful. He began reading each word, one after another from the very beginning. Sometimes he was enlightened, sometimes confused, sometimes puzzled, and sometimes in pain. The letter Furz had sent wasn't long. He only used 3 minutes to read it twice before he fell into a long silence. The sunlight shined through the window and landed on the toppled table. Dorian Gray Abraham's lips suddenly quivered, but he ultimately didn't make a sound. Separated by a piece of paper, his right thumb and index finger quickly rubbed against each other, and ignited the letter with a scarlet flame. After doing all of this, Dorian packed his belongings, put on his disguise, changed his clothes, and left the rented apartment. Using the identity he had previously prepared, he went to another place. After settling down, he sat beside the desk and stared at the brass ornament, seemingly deep in thought. The area became darker and darker as the sunlight weakened. Dorian's eyelids twitched as he slowly sighed. He then unfolded the piece of paper and picked up the fountain pen. As he pondered, he wrote, I'm very happy to see you digesting the scribe potion in a few months. This means that you might really become a demigod. These are the key points to take note of while acting as a traveler. At least the ones that I know of. However, you have to remember that everyone's personality is different. There will always be some differences in acting in real life, so you can't copy blindly. This doesn't mean that the acting principles of others are wrong, but that it might lead to a huge conflict in your heart, affecting your mental state. Sometimes you can make appropriate adjustments to slow down the speed at which the potion is being digested, but it will only be beneficial to you. You have to remember, acting is a tool, not something to lord over you. I look forward to the day you completely digest the traveler potion. I will prepare the corresponding ingredients and a present for you. I'm very interested in the matter of the Abraham family's curse mentioned by that gentleman. I think you should have noticed long ago that I have done a certain degree of research on such matters. Otherwise, you wouldn't always ask me about such matters. I hope you can continue to learn about this matter at a deeper level. After writing the reply, Dorian Gray Abraham closed his eyes and quickly folded the paper. January 1351. Backlund's new year was much bleaker than before. In a basement in Westborough, there were a few candles flickering with yellow flames, illuminating the surrounding altars, chairs, and round tables. At the edge of the light, in a place that was extremely dark, a figure appeared indistinct. At times it would sway, sometimes stretching into a thin entity that didn't have any thickness. It was like a shadow that came alive. Suddenly, the figure said in a deep voice, "You arrived earlier than I expected." Beside the candle, a figure quickly appeared in the spot illuminated the greatest by the light. It was a man dressed in a mysterious black robe. His brown hair was slightly curled, and his dark, deep eyes seemed to contain countless objects. He was none other than one of the 5 saints of the Aurora Order, the Saint of Secrets, Bodis. Bodis smiled and said, "To me, distance is not a problem." He pulled a chair and sat down before saying to the long and narrow shadow, "Have you investigated thoroughly? Did you find anything unusual?" The shadow that nearly slinked into the shadows answered in a low voice, "There aren't any problems." Really? At the confirmation of the question, Bodis instinctively had doubts. Kisma, could this be a trap? The Aurora Order's Saint Tenebris, Kisma, slowly shook his head and said, "The target is very careful. It's definitely not a case of deliberate exposure. If she wasn't seeking to purchase an ancient wraith's cursed item, we wouldn't have been able to sense that she might be related to the Abraham family." Saint of Secrets Bodis seemed to be in thought as he said, "An ancient wraith's cursed item. This is one of the main ingredients of scribe. I remember that the Abraham family does have a spare Asmon's brain. They aren't willing to directly provide a scribe beyonder characteristic, hoping to carry out some tests. It's indeed the style of the Abraham family. To put it simply, they don't have enough trust in others." Saint Tenebris Kisma didn't echo Bodhi's words as he continued, "Even if she was seeking to purchase the main ingredients of the scribe potion, we wouldn't have noticed any problems. After all, not every believer knows the corresponding mysticism knowledge, but she even mentioned some questions related to Apprentice and the Abrahams. She was really cautious in this aspect. The circle of beyonders from which she sought to purchase materials from, and the one she asked questions weren't the same. Different matters were left to different circles. Furthermore, at times, she would hire other participants to help her make requests. If it weren't for the fact that we have our people in those few circles and were able to combine the intelligence, we wouldn't have noticed her." Saint of Secrets Bodis nodded slightly and asked, "Why didn't you just take action? You even came to me?" In the shadows, the darkness stirred and replied slowly, "The situation in Backlund is getting more and more tense. The Nighthawks, the mandated punishers, and the machinery hive mind are carpet sweeping the area, one spot after another. We're being watched very closely. If I were to handle this matter, it would be fine if there weren't any accidents. However, if an accident were to happen, I might not be able to escape due to not having grazed a secret sorcerer. Besides, aren't you the one who is most interested in the Abraham family?" Bodis chuckled and said, "I'm not interested in them at all. I just want them to all die. To ensure my own safety, the most important thing is to nip revenge in the bud. This is the philosophy I abide by." As he spoke, the Saint of Secrets took out a crystal ball from his black robe's pocket. The crystal ball was neither clear nor translucent, as if it had been injected with the dark night. As he touched it with his palm, his lips quivered. This strange crystal ball suffused a resplendent glow. They were like stars that slowly spun, forming a complicated scene. "It's still acceptable." Bodis looked at the crystal ball in his right hand and nodded gently. He then looked at the ghostly shadow. "Give me the details." When he learned that there would be a beyonder gathering in a particular circle tonight, with the target possibly appearing, the Saint of Secrets Bodis stood up and said to Saint Tenebris Kisma, "I need to make some preparations." As soon as he finished speaking, his right hand opened and with a gentle lift, his fingers closed. The region he was in immediately warped and vanished. The candles, flames, round table, and chairs that were originally located here vanished, leaving behind only the tiles and ceiling. After a while, the shadows moved and everything returned to normal. Nothing happened to Saint of Secrets Bodhi's, but Saint Tenebrous' figure appeared out of the darkness. He looked at Bodhi's and said in a deep voice, "Your caution has exceeded the necessary limits. But this isn't a bad thing. I hope that I can resolve the problem without anyone noticing." Bodhi's replied with a smile. "You can follow me. You can hide in the shadows as my support. You will not directly appear, and you will leave immediately once you discover anything amiss." "All right." Saint Tenebrous Kisma slowly walked out of the shadows. He looked young and handsome with outstanding facial features, but his face seemed to be covered with a faint curtain of darkness. After coming close to Bodhi's, there were a series of illusory chewing sounds that came from nowhere. The chewing sounds and the sound of digesting could be heard, as well as undisguised evil and hunger. This made the demigod shudder involuntarily. Saint Tenebrous' eyes froze for a second as he cast a shocked and surprised look at Bodhi's face. The corners of Bodhi's mouth curled up as he revealed a rather cruel smile. A few seconds later, one of them used teleportation, and the other merged into the shadows and left the house. In an apartment that had been in disrepair for years, in the area intersecting Backlands East Borough and the Bridge area, there were a few rooms on the first floor of a cheap motel that had their rooms connected. When Bodhi's walked out from the spirit world, the Beyonder gathering was only to be held 2 to 3 hours later. No one had arrived yet. He looked around and took in the long tables that were arranged messily. After observing the environment, he walked to a corner with his right hand pulling the curtain. The region was then enveloped by a shadow, distorting before vanishing. This was because there wasn't anything there to begin with. There was no objective measure, so no one would have discovered that there was a space missing. They would only feel that the distance between the walls and themselves was a little closer, but upon closer inspection, everything was normal. This was the space concealment power of a secret sorcerer. They could use this ability to split a place into two and conceal part of it. One had to use a specific door to enter. At that moment, in the area that had been divided and hidden, the room existed normally. There were floor tiles, a ceiling, and a cockroach crawling across the ground. The cockroach rushed to the boundary and was blocked by the endless darkness. After Saint of Secrets Bodhi's surveyed the area, his gaze paused at a transparent vortex in midair. This was the door. Every hidden space would definitely have a door. After some thought, Bodhi's reached into the black robe's pocket, took out a mirror and inserted it into the door. The mirror twisted and quickly reflected the scene in the outside world. There were chairs and long tables randomly strewn around. The place was empty. In this way, Bodhi's used this mirror to monitor the Beyonder Gathering's venue. Seconds changed to minutes as the Beyonders dressed in various disguises arrived. One of the hooded figures habitually chose a corner near the window. She took out a palm-sized notebook and casually flipped through a few pages, as though she was revising the main points of her questions or checking if she was fully prepared. And behind her to the side, there was an ordinary mirror embedded in the wall. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.